a poor widow struggles to survive by baking bread in her tiny kitchen, until a CEO accidentally tastes it and, stunned by more than just the flavor, offers her something far greater than money. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, subscribe to the channel and let's get started. The scent of freshly baked bread filled Elaine Morgan's tiny apartment, a fragrance that momentarily masked the lingering smell of mildew from the leaking roof. At 56, the widow's hands were cracked and reddened from years of kneading dough, but they moved with practiced precision as she turned the golden loaf onto the cooling rack. Steam rose in delicate wisps, carrying with it the promise of temporary comfort in a life that had grown increasingly difficult since Thomas's death. "Another day, another dozen," she murmured to herself, wiping flour-dusted hands on her worn apron. The small kitchen timer, shaped like a rooster, a gift from Thomas on their 25th anniversary, chirped insistently, reminding her that the second batch still waited in the oven. Outside her ground-floor apartment window, Chicago's unforgiving winter had painted the world in shades of gray. Snow fell steadily, accumulating on the sill, beautiful in its symmetry, yet threatening in its persistence. The apartment's ancient heating system clanked and sputtered, struggling against the cold that seeped through poorly insulated walls. Elaine silently thanked the continuously running oven for providing much-needed warmth. With practiced movements, she removed 6 more loaves from the oven, their crusts perfectly browned, the interiors sure to be soft and airy. This wasn't just bread, it was survival. Since the factory where she'd worked for 15 years had closed without warning or proper severance 8 months ago, these loaves had become her lifeline. Each morning she baked, each afternoon she sold to neighbors and local cafes willing to pay cash under the table for homemade quality they couldn't find elsewhere. "Mrs. Morgan, are you decent?" The voice of her elderly neighbor, Walter Jenkins, was accompanied by 3 gentle knocks on her door. "Come in, Walter. Door's open," she called back, placing the final loaf on the cooling rack. The old man shuffled in, bringing with him a gust of cold air and the scent of mothballs from his ancient coat. At 83, Walter was her most faithful customer and in many ways a surrogate father since her own had passed years ago. "Smells like heaven in here as always." His rheumy eyes crinkled with genuine pleasure. "2 loaves today if you can spare them. The grandkids are visiting." Elaine smiled, selecting the largest loaves for him. "Of course, that'll be $6, but since it's for the little ones, let's make it 5. Walter produced a worn leather wallet from his coat pocket. "Nonsense. I'll pay the proper price and not a penny less." He counted out $6 bills, then added 2 more. "And this is for keeping an old man company once in a while." "Walter, I can't." "You can and you will." His tone was firm but kind. "Pride is a luxury for those who can afford heat in the winter, my dear." The truth of his words stung, but Elaine accepted the money with a grateful nod. Every dollar counted in her precarious financial situation. Between the rising rent, utilities, and medical bills that Thomas's insurance hadn't covered, her savings had evaporated like morning dew under a merciless sun. After Walter left, Elaine began preparing the remaining loaves for delivery. Each was carefully wrapped in parchment paper, then placed in recycled paper bags stamped with a simple logo she'd designed herself. Morgan's homemade bread encircling a stylized loaf. It wasn't fancy, but it lent a touch of professionalism to her underground operation. The local cafes paid better than individual customers, $12 per loaf, but were more demanding about consistency and timing. She couldn't afford to lose their business. Checking her watch, a simple timepiece Thomas had given her on their first anniversary, she noted she had 40 minutes to make her deliveries before the next batch needed attention. Bundling up against the bitter cold in a coat that had seen better days, Elaine loaded the bread into her pull cart, once used for groceries but now repurposed for her deliveries. As she stepped outside, the wind cut through her inadequate layers, making her gasp. Chicago winters showed no mercy to anyone, least of all aging widows with arthritis. The first stop was Café Lumière, a trendy establishment 3 blocks away that catered to young professionals who paid premium prices for artisanal products. The irony wasn't lost on Elaine that her bread, born of necessity rather than hipster aspirations, was being sold as an authentic luxury. "Morning, Elaine!" Marco, the cafe owner, greeted her at the back entrance, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air. "Right on time as always." "Good morning, Marco. 4 loaves today as ordered." She handed over the carefully wrapped packages. Marco inspected 1 loaf, nodding with approval. "Beautiful, as always. The customers go crazy for these. I could easily sell double if you could manage it." Elaine hesitated. More bread meant more income, but also longer hours in front of the oven and more ingredients to purchase up front. "I'll think about it," she said finally. "My hands aren't what they used to be." Marco counted out $48. "Well, the offer stands. Oh, and there's a new place opened up in the financial district. Very high-end. The owner was in here yesterday raving about my bread selection. I might have mentioned you." He winked. "His card's in the bag. Might be worth a call." Thanking him, Elaine tucked the money and the card into her coat pocket without looking at it. New clients were always welcome, but the financial district was at least a 30-minute bus ride away, time she couldn't easily spare and transportation costs she could hardly afford. Her next stop was the Daily Grind, a small coffee shop frequented by college students. The owner, Sophia, a Greek woman in her 40s with an infectious laugh, embraced Elaine warmly. "This cold will be the death of us all," Sophia exclaimed. Come in, I have coffee ready." Inside the cozy shop, Elaine gratefully accepted a steaming mug while Sophia examined the 3 loaves she'd brought. "Perfect timing. I'm down to my last slices from yesterday. Your bread sells faster than anything else we offer." Sophia handed over $36. "How are you holding up, truly?" Elaine sipped her coffee, allowing the warmth to spread through her chilled body before answering. "I'm managing." It was her standard response, not quite a lie, not quite the truth. Sophia's dark eyes studied her with concern. "Managing isn't living, my friend. Have you considered my offer? My cousin owns a bakery in Greektown. He needs experienced hands." The offer was tempting. Steady employment, regular hours, benefits perhaps. But the bakery was an hour away by public transport, and the early morning shifts would require her to leave her apartment at 3 a.m., navigating some of the city's less savory areas in the dark. "I appreciate it, Sophia, I really do. But for now, this arrangement works for me." Elaine stood, gathering her empty pull cart. "I should get back. More loaves in the oven." Outside again, the temperature seemed to have dropped further, the wind more biting. Elaine pulled her scarf tighter, wishing she'd worn an extra layer. As she waited for the pedestrian light to change, an expensive black car pulled up beside her, its engine purring with the quiet confidence of German engineering. The window rolled down, revealing a middle-aged man in a tailored suit, his expression impatient. "Excuse me," he called out. "I'm looking for the Daily Grind coffee shop. My GPS is giving conflicting directions." Elaine pointed across the street. "It's right there, the green awning." "Ah, I see it now. Thank you." The man's gaze dropped to her cart. "Are you a vendor there?" In a manner of speaking. She hesitated, then added, "I supply their bread." Something sparked in the man's eyes. Interest, perhaps, or simple curiosity. "Homemade?" "Yes. From my kitchen to their counter." The light changed and Elaine began to cross, effectively ending the conversation. She felt the man's eyes following her but didn't look back. People from that world, the world of expensive cars and tailored suits, existed in a different reality than hers. Their paths might occasionally cross, but they never truly intersected. Back in her apartment, Elaine removed the final batch of bread from the oven, the day's labor nearly complete. While the loaves cooled, She checked her dwindling supplies. Flour was running low, and butter prices had increased again. She would need to adjust her budget somewhere else to compensate. Sitting at her small kitchen table, she finally remembered the business card Marco had given her. She pulled it from her pocket and studied it. Alexander Reed, CEO, Reed Hospitality Group. Below the embossed name was a phone number and an address in the heart of the financial district. Elaine set the card aside. Companies like that worked with professional bakeries, not widows making bread in apartment kitchens without proper licenses or health department certifications. It was a fantasy to think otherwise. That evening, as sleet began to tap against her windows like impatient fingers, Elaine calculated her day's earnings. After deducting the cost of ingredients, utilities, and setting aside a portion for rent, she had cleared $37. Not enough. Never enough. Her gaze fell on Thomas's photograph, taken on their last anniversary before the cancer diagnosis. He was smiling broadly, his arm around her shoulders, the lake shimmering behind them. "What would you do, Tom?" she whispered to the empty room. Her husband had always been the brave one, the one willing to take chances. "Nothing ventured, nothing gained," he would say when encouraging her to step outside her comfort zone. With a deep breath, Elaine picked up her cell phone, a basic model that Thomas had insisted she get for emergencies, and the business card. Before she could talk herself out of it, she dialed the number. To her surprise, a man answered directly instead of a secretary or answering service. Alexander Reed speaking. "Mr. Reed, my name is Elaine Morgan. I understand from Marco at Café Lumière that you might be interested in my bread for your establishment." There was a pause, then recognition in his voice. "Ah, yes. Marco spoke highly of your products. We're opening a new rooftop restaurant focusing on locally sourced, artisanal offerings. Your bread could be a perfect fit." Hope flickered in Elaine's chest, but experience had taught her caution. "I should mention that I operate on a small scale from my home kitchen. Quality over quantity, Mrs. Morgan. We'd need to sample your work, of course, and discuss logistics, but I'm certainly interested. Could you bring some samples to my office tomorrow morning? Say, 9 o'clock? Tomorrow was rent day. She had planned to bake extra loaves to make up the shortfall in her funds. But this opportunity— "Yes," she heard herself say. "I'll be there." After ending the call, Elaine sat motionless, questioning her decision. The financial district was another world, one where people like her were usually invisible except when serving coffee or cleaning floors. What was she thinking? Thomas's voice seemed to whisper in her ear, "You're thinking about surviving, Lainey." Same as always. With renewed determination, Elaine rose and began preparing dough for the morning. This batch would be special, her best flour, the premium butter she usually saved for special occasions, herbs from the small container garden on her windowsill. If she was going to step into Alexander Reed's world, even briefly, her bread would be her ambassador. Outside, the sleet turned to snow again, covering the city in a deceptive blanket of purity. Tomorrow would bring what it would bring. For tonight, Elaine had purpose, and sometimes that was enough to keep the cold at bay. Dawn arrived with unforgiving swiftness. Elaine had slept fitfully, her mind cycling through scenarios of the upcoming meeting, most of them featuring her humiliation in various forms. The alarm's persistent buzz at 4:30 a.m. was almost a relief, giving her permission to abandon the pretense of rest. Her tiny kitchen quickly filled with the comforting aromas of baking as she prepared both her regular orders and special loaves for Alexander Reed. She had settled on 3 varieties: her classic sourdough, an herb-infused country loaf, and a hearty multigrain that Thomas had always claimed could sustain a man through any hardship. Each was shaped with extra care, scored with precise patterns that would bloom beautifully in the oven's heat. By 7:15, her regular deliveries were complete. Elaine returned to her apartment to change for the meeting, standing before her closet with uncharacteristic indecision. Her wardrobe consisted primarily of practical items: Jeans, sweaters worn soft with age, button-up shirts in muted colors. Nothing appropriate for the gleaming towers of the financial district. Finally, she settled on her funeral outfit, a black skirt and blazer last worn to Thomas's service, with a deep blue blouse that he had once said brought out the color of her eyes. The ensemble hung more loosely on her frame than it had 2 years ago, but there was no time for alterations. A light application of makeup, her mother's simple pearl earrings and practical black flats completed the look. The bus ride downtown was an exercise in anxiety management. Elaine clutched her basket of carefully wrapped loaves, fighting the irrational fear that the precious bread might somehow become damaged or spoiled in transit. She had spent her last $20 on taxi fare for the return journey, a necessity given the winter weather and her good clothes, leaving her with exactly nothing until she could make more bread sales. The Reed Hospitality Group occupied the upper floors of a sleek glass tower that seemed to pierce the low-hanging winter clouds. In the lobby, a security guard regarded her skeptically until she mentioned her appointment with Alexander Reed. A quick phone call later, she was issued a visitor's badge and directed to the express elevator for the 47th floor. The elevator's swift ascent made her ears pop and her stomach lurch. Its mirrored walls reflected a woman trying very hard not to look out of place, her knuckles white where she gripped the basket handle. When the doors slid open with a discreet chime, Elaine stepped into another world. The reception area was a study in understated luxury: cream marble floors, furniture in soft leather and rich wood, abstract art in tasteful frames. Behind a desk that probably cost more than a year of Elaine's rent sat a young woman with flawlessly styled hair and an expression of professional pleasantness. "Mrs. Morgan for Mr. Reed," Elaine said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Of course, Mr. Reed is expecting you." The receptionist rose gracefully. "May I take your coat?" After surrendering her worn winter coat, which looked even shabbier in these surroundings, Elaine followed the young woman down a corridor lined with photographs of upscale hotels and restaurants. The Reed Hospitality Group's holdings, she presumed. They stopped before a set of double doors, which the receptionist opened after a gentle knock. "Mrs. Morgan is here, Mr. Reed." The office beyond was vast by Elaine's standards, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the Chicago skyline and Lake Michigan beyond. Alexander Reed stood from behind his imposing desk, and Elaine recognized him immediately as the man from the car yesterday. "Mrs. Morgan, thank you for coming." He crossed the room to greet her, his handshake firm but not overpowering. Up close, she noted details her brief encounter hadn't revealed: the silver threading his dark hair at the temples, lines of fatigue around his eyes that expensive tailoring and success couldn't quite mask. "Please have a seat." He gestured toward a seating area near the windows where a coffee service had been arranged on a low table. As Elaine took her place on the leather sofa, she was acutely aware of the contrast between them. His bespoke suit probably cost more than she made in 3 months. "Coffee?" he offered, already reaching for the silver pot. "Yes, thank you. Black is fine." He poured for them both, then sat opposite her. "I must admit I was intrigued when Marco mentioned you yesterday. Even more so when I realized you were the woman I'd spoken to outside the daily grind." Elaine set her basket on the table. "I brought samples, as requested." "Excellent." He seemed genuinely pleased. "But first, tell me about your operation. How long have you been baking professionally?" The question gave her pause. "I wouldn't call it professional exactly. I've been baking all my life, learned from my grandmother, but I only started selling my bread after—" She hesitated, then continued more firmly. "After my husband died and the factory where I worked closed down. About 8 months now." Alexander leaned forward slightly, his expression sharpening with interest. "And you produce everything yourself? From your home?" "Yes. It's just me in my apartment kitchen. I make about 30 loaves a day, sometimes more for special orders." 30 loaves daily from a home kitchen? His eyebrows rose. That's impressive output for one person without industrial equipment. Elaine shrugged slightly. Necessity is a powerful motivator, Mr. Reed. Something flickered in his eyes. Respect, perhaps, or recognition. Indeed it is. And please call me Alex. He gestured toward the basket. May I? Elaine unwrapped the loaves, arranging them on the serving board she had brought. The bread looked even better than she had hoped. Golden crusts cracked perfectly, interiors airy yet substantial when sliced. Alex examined each variety with unexpectedly knowledgeable eyes before cutting slices. He smelled the bread first, closing his eyes briefly as he inhaled. When he finally took a bite of the sourdough, his expression transformed. This is... He paused, taking another bite. This is exceptional, Mrs. Morgan. Elaine, please. Elaine? He nodded, moving on to the herb loaf. The texture is perfect. That crust and the flavor development. How long do you ferment your dough? Surprised by his technical knowledge, she answered, For the sourdough, about 16 hours. The starter itself is over 30 years old, my grandmother's. Alex was now tasting the multi-grain, his appreciation evident. You can taste the heritage in it. He set down the slice, fixing her with a direct gaze. What is your current distribution model? Just the 2 cafes I know about? 3 cafes, plus direct sales to neighbors. It's all word of mouth, cash transactions. She hesitated, then added with painful honesty, Not exactly above board, legally speaking. I can't afford the licenses and certifications a proper bakery requires. Instead of the disapproval she expected, Alex merely nodded. Many great businesses started in legal gray areas. The important thing is the quality, which is undeniable. He leaned back, studying her. Our new restaurant, Skyline, opens in 3 weeks. The concept focuses on showcasing the best local ingredients and artisans Chicago has to offer. Your bread would be perfect, authentic, skillfully crafted, with a genuine story behind it. Hope fluttered in Elaine's chest, but caution tempered it. I'm flattered, but as I mentioned, my operation isn't exactly commercial grade. I doubt I could meet the volume a restaurant would require. What if you had proper equipment and space? Alex asked, his tone casual but his eyes intent. What would you be capable of then? The question caught her off guard. I'm not sure. With a professional oven, proper mixers, maybe triple my current output. But that's purely hypothetical. Alex set down his coffee cup with a decisive motion. Let me be direct, Elaine. I want your bread exclusively for Skyline. We would need approximately 100 loaves daily in assorted varieties. In return, we're prepared to offer you a contract with very favorable terms, including helping you set up a proper production facility. The world seemed to tilt slightly under Elaine's feet. That's very generous, but I don't have the capital for that kind of expansion. We would front the necessary equipment costs, recouping them gradually through the contract. He named a monthly figure that made Elaine's breath catch. It was more than she had made in her best months at the factory, with benefits. This seems too good to be true, she said finally. Why would you take such a risk on someone like me? Alex's expression softened almost imperceptibly. Because in this industry, finding authentic quality is increasingly rare. Most artisanal products now are mass-produced with artisanal labels slapped on for marketing. What you create, he gestured to the bread, can't be faked. And our clientele can tell the difference. I don't know what to say. Say you'll consider it. Our legal team will draw up a proposal for you to review. He rose, signaling the meeting's end. Take a few days to think it over. In a daze, Elaine gathered her things, leaving the bread samples behind at Alex's request. As they walked to the door, he asked, By the way, why did you decide to bake bread specifically when you needed income? Most people in sudden financial difficulties look for traditional employment first. The question was unexpected, but the answer came easily. My husband always said my bread was too good to give away for free. When I needed money, it was the one valuable skill I knew I possessed that was entirely mine." She smiled faintly. "And bread is fundamental. People always need bread." Alex regarded her thoughtfully. "Indeed they do." He handed her his business card, a different one than she had received from Marco, this one with his private cell number handwritten on the back. "Call me when you've decided, or if you have any questions." The descent in the elevator felt like returning to Earth after visiting another planet. By the time Elaine exited the building, the morning's confidence had begun to erode, replaced by nagging doubts. What did she know about contracts and business agreements? How could she possibly fulfill an order of 100 loaves daily? Was she being naive to think this opportunity was genuine? As promised, a taxi was waiting to take her home. During the ride, she stared out at the city streets, watching the neighborhoods transition from affluence to increasing signs of economic struggle. Her building, when they reached it, looked even more dilapidated than usual in contrast to the gleaming tower she had just left. Inside her apartment, the reality of her situation reasserted itself immediately. A notice had been slipped under her door while she was out. Rent was due by 5 p.m. No exceptions or extensions. Her empty wallet mocked her. The only path forward was to bake and sell as much as possible in the next few hours. As she tied on her apron, the phone rang. An unfamiliar number. Thinking it might be Alex with additional information, she answered quickly. "Mrs. Morgan?" A woman's crisp voice responded to her greeting. "This is Veronica Klein, Mr. Reed's executive assistant. I'm calling to arrange delivery of the contract for your review. Also, Mr. Reed asked me to confirm that the first payment has been transferred to your account as a good faith deposit. You should see it reflected in your balance by end of day." "Payment? But I haven't agreed to anything yet." Mr. Reed was most insistent. He said, and I quote, "People always need bread, but sometimes bakers need rent money first." After the call ended, Elaine stood motionless in her kitchen, the implications slowly sinking in. Alexander Reed had somehow known exactly what she needed most urgently. The question was, why did he care? The deposit appeared in Elaine's account just as Veronica had promised, $5,000, a sum that made her stare at the ATM screen in disbelief. After paying her rent and outstanding bills, she still had more money than she'd seen at once since Thomas's medical expenses had drained their savings. The contract arrived by courier that same afternoon, 15 pages of dense legal terminology that left her head spinning. That evening, Walter Jenkins knocked on her door, drawn by the aroma of cinnamon rolls, a luxury Elaine rarely allowed herself to bake anymore, but today felt different. "Something's happened," the old man observed shrewdly, accepting a warm roll and a cup of tea. "You're practically glowing." Elaine hesitated only briefly before sharing the day's events. Walter listened attentively, nodding occasionally, his expression growing more serious as she explained the contract waiting for her signature. "Sounds like an incredible opportunity," he said when she finished. "But business deals that seem too good to be true often are, my dear. Have you considered having a lawyer review this contract?" The suggestion hadn't occurred to her. "I don't know any lawyers, and I certainly can't afford one." Walter smiled. "As it happens, my nephew Gregory is an attorney, corporate law, specializing in small business contracts. I could ask him to look it over as a favor." 2 days later, Elaine sat in a modest law office while Gregory Jenkins, a middle-aged man with his uncle's kind eyes and a meticulously trimmed beard, explained his findings. "Overall, Mrs. Morgan, this is a surprisingly fair agreement. The terms are actually quite generous." He pointed to specific clauses. Full health insurance, guaranteed minimum monthly payments regardless of the restaurant's performance, ownership of all equipment after the 2-year contract period. "No hidden catches?" Elaine asked, still skeptical. Gregory shook his head. "Nothing I can find. There's an exclusivity clause. You can't sell your bread to competitors during the contract, but that's standard. I've made a few minor suggestions." He slid an annotated copy across the desk. "But honestly, if one of my regular clients brought this to me, I'd tell them to sign immediately." He removed his glasses, cleaning them thoughtfully. "The only unusual aspect is how favorable it is to you. Reed Hospitality Group typically drives much harder bargains." Elaine thought of Alex's unexpected understanding, the deposit that had saved her from eviction. "Perhaps Mr. Reed has his reasons." "Perhaps." Gregory replaced his glasses. "Uncle Walter mentioned you lost your husband recently. I'm sorry for your loss." "Thank you, it's been 2 years, but some days it feels like yesterday." He nodded sympathetically. "My wife and I divorced 3 years ago. Different circumstances, but I understand how life's sudden changes can leave you vulnerable. If you decide to proceed with this contract, I'd be happy to continue representing your interests." When Elaine began to protest, he raised a hand. "Pro bono for now. Call it my contribution to Uncle Walter's unofficial senior welfare program. That man has helped half the building where he lives." With Gregory's recommended changes incorporated, Elaine signed the contract the following day in Alex's office. The meeting was brief, but cordial, with Alex seeming genuinely pleased by her decision. "Veronica will coordinate everything," he assured her. "We've located a suitable production space not far from your apartment, a former bakery that went out of business last year. The equipment is being delivered next week." "How will this work exactly?" Elaine asked. "I've never run a legitimate business before." "Veronica has arranged for an accountant who specializes in small business setup. He'll help you with licensing, taxes, insurance, all the bureaucratic details." Alex's expression softened slightly. "Try not to worry, Elaine. We want you focused on what you do best, making extraordinary bread." The following weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity. The suitable production space turned out to be a charming storefront with a fully equipped industrial kitchen. When Elaine questioned the extravagance, the equipment far exceeded what was necessary for supplying a single restaurant, Alex merely shrugged. "The contract includes an option to expand our partnership if things go well," he explained. "Better to have the capacity in place from the start." A small staff was hired to assist her. Javier, a culinary school graduate with expertise in dough handling, Maya, a young single mother with a sunny disposition and quick hands, and Omar, a refugee from Syria who had operated his family's bakery before the war forced them to flee. Each brought valuable skills, but more importantly, each treated Elaine's recipes and methods with genuine respect. "In Damascus, bread is sacred," Omar told her one morning as they worked side by side, shaping loaves with practiced movements. "The baker holds a position of honor in the community. Your sourdough," he gestured to the bubbling starter that Elaine had carefully transported from her apartment, "it has soul. This is not just a job to you. I can tell." February turned to March, and the bread production settled into a comfortable rhythm. Elaine found herself enjoying the work more than she had anticipated. Her small team functioned well together, and the professional equipment made everything more efficient while still allowing for the handcrafted quality that defined her bread. On the personal front, she had moved from her dingy apartment to a modest but pleasant one-bedroom unit closer to the bakery. The building had reliable heating, no leaks, and windows that actually sealed against the winter cold, small luxuries that felt like unimaginable wealth after years of making do. Skyline's grand opening approached rapidly. 2 days before the event, Alex invited Elaine to tour the restaurant for the first time. Located on the top floor of one of Chicago's most prestigious buildings, the space was breathtaking. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the city and lakefront, while the interior featured warm woods, natural stone, and subtle lighting that created an atmosphere of relaxed elegance. "What do you think?" Alex asked, watching her reaction closely. "It's beautiful," Elaine admitted, intimidated by the thought of her humble bread being served in such sophisticated surroundings. "Wait until you see the kitchen." He led her through swinging doors into a gleaming culinary workshop that would make professional chefs weep with envy. The head chef, Philippe Laroche, A Frenchman with impeccable credentials and a surprisingly unpretentious manner greeted Elaine warmly. "Ah, the bread genius. Alex has told me so much about your work." His accent was pronounced but charming. "Your sourdough? Magnifique. We have designed 3 dishes specifically to showcase it." As they continued the tour, Alex explained the restaurant's concept in greater detail. Each menu item tells the story of its origins: the farmers who grew the vegetables, the family that produced the cheese, the fishermen who supply our seafood. He gestured toward an elegant display near the entrance. "And your bread will be highlighted here, with your story featured prominently." Elaine stopped short. "My story?" "Nothing invasive," Alex assured her quickly. "Just a brief background about your baking heritage, your commitment to traditional methods. We've found that diners connect more deeply with their food when they understand the human elements behind it." The idea of her personal history being served alongside her bread made Elaine profoundly uncomfortable, but she held her tongue. This was business after all, and Alex had been more than generous. She could tolerate a bit of discomfort. On opening night, Elaine was invited as a special guest. She wore a new dress, nothing extravagant but well-made and flattering to her figure, purchased with a small portion of her now steady income. Walter accompanied her, dapper in his best suit, serving as both her escort and a buffer against the anxiety of entering such a rarefied space alone. The evening was a blur of introductions, compliments, and observations. From her table, Elaine watched as the city's elite dined on dishes featuring her bread, her grandmother's recipes elevated to high cuisine. It was surreal, like watching someone else's life unfold before her. Alex stopped by several times, introducing her to various guests as the artisan behind our extraordinary bread. Each time he spoke of her work with genuine admiration that left her flustered but pleased. Later, as the evening wound down, Alex joined them for coffee and dessert. Walter, ever observant, excused himself to rest these old legs, leaving them alone. "You seem troubled," Alex noted, studying her expression. "Is something wrong?" Elaine hesitated, then decided on honesty. "It feels strange, seeing something so personal to me, my bread, my family traditions, transformed into this." She gestured at the elegant surroundings. "You think it diminishes your work somehow?" "No, not diminishes, but it changes it into something I don't fully recognize." Alex considered this thoughtfully. "I understand. There's a kind of authenticity that gets lost in translation, even with the best intentions." He leaned forward slightly. "But consider this perspective. Your grandmother's recipes, your techniques, they're reaching people who would never have experienced them otherwise. Isn't there value in that?" Before she could respond, they were interrupted by Philippe, who insisted on introducing Elaine to a food critic who had raved about her sourdough. By the time she returned to the table, Walter was back, and the moment for deeper conversation had passed. The next morning, Elaine arrived at the bakery before dawn, as usual. She found Alex already there, dressed casually in jeans and a sweater, an outfit so unlike his usual corporate armor that she almost didn't recognize him. "I hope you don't mind," he said, looking somewhat self-conscious. "I wanted to see the process from beginning to end, just once, to understand it better." Surprise rendered her momentarily speechless. "It's your business," she managed finally. "You're welcome any time. Actually, it's your business. Reed Hospitality is just a client." The distinction seemed important to him, though Elaine knew the reality was more complicated. Without his investment, none of this would exist. As her team arrived and the morning's work began, Alex observed quietly, occasionally asking questions but mostly watching with intense focus. He seemed particularly interested in the sourdough starter, asking detailed questions about its maintenance and history. "My grandmother got it from her mother, who brought it from Poland when she immigrated in 1912, Elaine explained. "It's been alive longer than any of us." "A living legacy," Alex murmured. "Extraordinary." When the first batch of dough was ready for shaping, Elaine hesitated, then offered, "Would you like to try?" For a moment, Alex looked startled, then pleased. "I'd probably ruin it." "Bread is forgiving if you approach it with respect." She demonstrated the technique, then guided his hands through the motions. His fingers were surprisingly deft, quickly adapting to the feel of the dough. There was something unexpectedly intimate about the moment. His sleeves rolled up, focus complete, learning something she had mastered decades ago. It revealed a vulnerability she hadn't anticipated from someone so polished and controlled. "My mother baked," he said suddenly, eyes still on his work. "Not professionally, but she loved it. Sunday afternoons, the house would fill with the smell of her bread. She died when I was 12. Cancer." The personal revelation caught Elaine off guard. "I'm sorry." "Long time ago." His expression remained neutral, but something in his voice suggested the wound wasn't as healed as he pretended. "I haven't thought about her baking in years." Elaine understood suddenly that this moment, hands in dough surrounded by the comforting smells of a working bakery, might be resurrecting memories both precious and painful for him. She remembered how, in the months after Thomas died, certain triggers would unexpectedly transport her back. The particular way sunlight fell across their bed in late afternoon, the sound of the baseball game he would have been watching, the smell of his favorite coffee. "Grief ambushes us sometimes," she said quietly, "in the strangest places." Alex looked up sharply, as if surprised by her insight. For a moment, his carefully maintained facade seemed to waver, revealing something raw underneath. Then it was gone, replaced by his usual composed demeanor. "Indeed it does," he said lightly, turning his attention back to the dough. "How am I doing with this? Not bad for a first attempt. You might have a future in baking if the hospitality empire ever collapses." He laughed, the tension broken. "I'll keep that in mind as my fallback plan." Skyline's success exceeded even Alex's ambitious projections. Within weeks of opening, reservations were booked solid 2 months in advance. Food critics wrote rapturous reviews, with several specifically mentioning the transcendent bread service. Chicago Magazine featured the restaurant in a glossy spread, including a half-page photograph of Elaine's sourdough alongside an abbreviated version of her story. For Elaine, the attention was both flattering and discomfiting. Her small production bakery had expanded its output to meet growing demand. Alex had arranged for her bread to be available in the Reed Hospitality Group's other Chicago properties as well. She had hired 2 additional assistants and was considering a second shift to keep up. Omar had proven invaluable, taking on supervisory responsibilities when Elaine needed rest. "You must pace yourself," he advised one evening when he found her still working well past the time everyone else had gone home. "The bread knows when the baker is tired. It senses everything." The truth was, Elaine wasn't sure how to handle leisure time anymore. For so long, survival had consumed every waking moment. Now, with financial stability restored and even a modest savings account growing, she sometimes felt adrift when she wasn't working. The bakery had become more than a workplace. It was her anchor in a life that had changed so rapidly she sometimes felt she would float away without it. April arrived with unseasonable warmth, coaxing early blossoms from the trees in the small park near her new apartment. On a rare day off, Elaine sat on a bench watching children play, feeling the sun on her face and wondering what Thomas would think of her transformation from struggling widow to successful business owner in just a few months. "He'd be proud," she murmured to herself, almost believing it. Thomas had always had more faith in her abilities than she did. "Who would be proud?" a familiar voice asked. Elaine looked up, startled to find Alex standing nearby. Gone was the corporate uniform. Today he wore casual slacks and a light sweater, looking more like a college professor than a CEO. "My husband," she answered truthfully, seeing no reason to dissemble. "I was just thinking aloud." "May I?" He gestured to the empty space beside her. She nodded, shifting slightly to make room. "I'm surprised to see you here. Don't CEOs work on Saturdays?" "Usually, but it's such a perfect day I decided to play hooky." His smile held a boyish quality she hadn't seen before. The Chicago spring is too brief not to appreciate it when it arrives. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching a toddler's determined attempts to climb a slide while his watchful mother hovered nearby. "I grew up near here," Alex said eventually. "Different neighborhood but similar park. My mother would bring me on Saturdays while my father worked." Elaine glanced at him, curious about this glimpse into his past. "Were you an only child?" "Until I was 10. Then my sister, Caroline, came along. A surprise baby, as they used to say." His expression softened with the memory. "She's in California now, marine biologist." "That's quite different from the hospitality business." Alex chuckled. "The Reed family rebel. Our father wanted both of us in the family business, but Caro was determined to chart her own course." There was unmistakable admiration in his voice. "She's done remarkable conservation work." "And you followed the path laid out for you?" The question was more direct than she'd intended, but Alex didn't seem offended. "I did, though not without some resistance initially. I wanted to be a chef, actually. Spent 2 years at culinary school before my father's health problems necessitated my return to the family business." This revelation surprised her. "I had no idea you had culinary training." It was a lifetime ago. Something in his tone suggested the subject might be painful. "But it still influences how I approach our restaurants. Food should be more than sustenance. It should tell a story, create connection." The conversation shifted to lighter topics: favorite parks in the city, childhood memories, the unpredictable Chicago weather. Elaine found herself relaxing in his company in a way she hadn't during their previous, more formal interactions. This Alex, casual, occasionally self-deprecating, knowledgeable about obscure city history, was easier to relate to than the impeccably tailored CEO. When the afternoon shadows lengthened, they walked together toward the street. "I've actually been meaning to contact you," Alex said, his tone becoming more businesslike. "There's been a development you should know about?" Elaine felt a flicker of anxiety. "Is there a problem with the bread?" "No, quite the opposite. We've had inquiries from several high-end grocery chains interested in carrying your bread. They've seen it at Skyline and want to offer it to their customers." She stopped walking. "Grocery stores? That would mean a massive increase in production." "It would, but it's also an incredible opportunity for growth." Alex studied her expression. "You don't seem thrilled." Elaine chose her words carefully. "When we started this arrangement, I was desperate and grateful for any opportunity. Now, I need to consider what I really want from this business. Mass production wasn't part of my vision." Instead of the corporate pushback she half expected, Alex nodded thoughtfully. "Fair enough. It's your company, your decision. But will you at least consider exploring the possibilities before deciding? I can arrange meetings with the interested parties so you can ask questions, understand what would be involved." "I can do that much," she agreed. They parted ways at the corner, but not before Alex extended another unexpected invitation. "By the way, my sister is visiting next weekend. I'm hosting a small dinner at my home on Saturday. Nothing formal, just a few friends. I'd be pleased if you would join us." Elaine hesitated, sensing that accepting would cross some invisible boundary between their professional and personal lives. Yet the prospect of spending an evening in normal social interaction, something that had been largely absent since Thomas's death, was tempting. "Thank you, I'd like that." The address Alex provided was in Lincoln Park, one of Chicago's most desirable neighborhoods. Elaine arrived precisely on time, bearing a loaf of fig and walnut bread she had baked that morning specifically for the occasion. The building was a beautifully restored brownstone with an understated elegance that matched its owner. A housekeeper admitted her, taking her coat and leading her to a warmly lit living room where several people were already gathered, drinks in hand. Alex broke away from a conversation to greet her, accepting the bread with genuine pleasure. "This wasn't necessary, but I'm selfishly glad you brought it. Come, let me introduce you." The small assembly included Caroline Reed, a vivacious woman in her early 40s with her brother's dark eyes and a marine biologist's deep tan. Martine Chen, Skyline's sommelier, and Elaine Gathered, a longtime friend of Alex's. Gabriela Ortiz, an architect whose firm had designed several Reed hospitality properties, and Thomas Keene, a silver-haired investment banker who had apparently been Alex's mentor early in his career. To Elaine's relief, no one asked probing questions about her background or made her feel out of place. The conversation flowed naturally through topics ranging from Caroline's latest research project to the city's architectural renaissance. When dinner was announced, they moved to a dining room dominated by a handsome table that could comfortably seat 12 but had been set for just the 6 of them. The meal was expertly prepared but not ostentatious. Roasted chicken with spring vegetables, a simple green salad, and a chocolate dessert so delicate it seemed to melt at the touch of a fork. Throughout the evening, Elaine noticed how Alex seemed more animated in these surroundings than in his corporate environment, laughing more readily, gesturing expressively when making a point, teasing his sister with the comfortable familiarity of long relationship. When Caroline mentioned growing up surrounded by the hotel business, Elaine saw an opening to satisfy her curiosity. "Alex mentioned your father wanted both of you to join the family business. Was he the founder of Reed Hospitality?" A strange silence fell over the table. Caroline and Alex exchanged glances that seemed to carry an entire conversation in seconds. "No," Caroline said finally. "Our grandfather founded the company. One hotel to start, then gradual expansion. Our father complicated the legacy somewhat." "What my diplomatic sister means," Alex added with a hint of bitterness, "is that our father nearly ran the company into the ground through mismanagement and poor decisions. When his health failed, I stepped in to salvage what remained." Thomas Keene nodded soberly. "What Alex isn't saying is that he took over a company on the brink of bankruptcy at age 26, and not only saved it but transformed it into one of the most respected hospitality groups in the country." Elaine glanced at Alex, who looked uncomfortable with the praise. "It was a team effort." "It was your vision and determination," Gabriela corrected gently. "You should own your accomplishments, amigo." As the evening progressed, Elaine found herself increasingly drawn to this more complex version of Alexander Reed, a man who had shouldered enormous responsibility at a young age, who still carried wounds from his past but had built something meaningful despite them. After dessert, while the others moved back to the living room for coffee, Elaine helped Alex bring dishes to the kitchen despite his protests. "I didn't know about your father," she said quietly as they worked side by side. "That must have been incredibly difficult, taking over the business at such a young age." Alex rinsed a plate before responding. "It was, educational. I learned quickly who I could trust and who was waiting for me to fail." He glanced at her. "Is that why you're helping with the dishes? Professional curiosity about the CEO who does housework?" "Force of habit. My mother taught me never to visit someone's home without helping clean up." She set a stack of plates in the dishwasher. "Besides, I wanted to ask you something away from the others." "Sounds serious. Why did you really invest in my bread business, Alex?" "The truth. It wasn't just because the product was good, was it?" His hands stilled, water running unheeded over the silverware he'd been rinsing. For a moment, Elaine thought he might deflect the question with a joke or vague answer. Instead, he turned off the faucet and faced her directly. "No, it wasn't just that, though your bread is exceptional." He seemed to be weighing his words carefully. "When I saw you that day outside the daily grind, pulling your cart through the snow, something about your determination reminded me of myself at my lowest point. Then when I tasted your bread..." He paused, searching for the right words. "It brought back memories I hadn't accessed in years." good memories from before everything fell apart. The vulnerability in his expression caught her off guard. This was not the calculated business decision she had suspected. This was something more personal, more human. So it was… what? Nostalgia? Charity? Neither. His response was immediate and firm. It was recognition of quality, of potential, of someone who deserved a better chance than life had given them. His eyes held hers. Was I wrong? Elaine considered his words, testing them against her own experience of the past months. No, she admitted finally. You weren't wrong. I just needed to understand. From the living room, laughter erupted, Caroline apparently recounting some amusing anecdote. The moment of intensity between them passed, replaced by awareness of the guests waiting beyond the kitchen. We should join the others, Alex said, drying his hands on a towel. As they returned to the living room, Elaine found herself seeing everything with new eyes. The easy camaraderie among friends who had stood by Alex during difficult times, the subtle ways he ensured everyone's comfort, the glimpses of the young man who had once dreamed of becoming a chef before responsibility redirected his path. Later, as the evening wound down, Caroline pulled Elaine aside. I'm glad my brother invited you tonight, she said, her voice low enough that only Elaine could hear. It's been a long time since I've seen him this relaxed. Whatever your influence is, it's a good one. Before Elaine could process this statement, Caroline was saying her goodbyes to the others, leaving Elaine with the unsettling awareness that her presence in Alex's life might be affecting him in ways neither of them had anticipated. The grocery chain meetings Alex arranged proved more intriguing than Elaine had anticipated. Rather than the impersonal corporate encounters she'd dreaded, they were thoughtful discussions about artisanal food philosophy and maintaining quality at scale. The most promising prospect, Hartwell's Markets, operated 12 high-end locations throughout Chicago and its affluent suburbs, with plans for gradual regional expansion. We don't want to change your methods, explained Catherine Hartwell, the chain's third-generation owner, during their second meeting. We want to showcase them. Small batch, authentic local products are exactly what our customers value. Catherine, a forthright woman in her 50s with shrewd eyes and a no-nonsense manner, had visited Elaine's bakery unannounced, arriving before dawn to observe the entire production process. She'd asked intelligent questions, tasted every variety, and even rolled up her sleeves to help shape loaves when one of Elaine's assistants called in sick. Most corporate types just want the story for marketing, Catherine had remarked while working alongside Elaine. They don't care about the actual craft. I respect that you haven't compromised your methods despite your success with Skyline. By the meeting's end, Elaine found herself genuinely considering the partnership. Hartwell's proposal would require doubling production initially, with gradual increases as consumer demand developed. They offered fair pricing that recognized the true value of handcrafted products, plus assistance with expanded distribution logistics. I'll need time to think it through, Elaine told Catherine. This would significantly change my operation. Of course, but don't wait too long. Catherine's expression grew more serious. Word about your bread is spreading. I'm not the only one who will be making offers. That prediction proved accurate the very next day when Elaine received an unexpected visitor at the bakery. James Winters, CEO of Pinnacle Foods, a national corporation known for acquiring small artisanal brands, arrived unannounced during the afternoon lull. Mrs. Morgan, your reputation precedes you. His smile was practiced, his Italian suit impeccable. I've just had the pleasure of experiencing your sourdough at Skyline. Remarkable product. Elaine regarded him warily. Thank you. We work hard to maintain quality. Indeed. Quality that deserves a wider audience, don't you think? I'd like to discuss acquisition possibilities for your brand. The directness of his approach surprised her. My brand isn't for sale, Mr. Winters. Everything has its price, he countered smoothly. Perhaps we could discuss this over dinner, somewhere quiet, where we won't be interrupted. The implication in his tone that this was more than a business meeting made her skin crawl. Any business discussions can happen here during working hours with my attorney present. Winters's smile tightened fractionally. Of course, professional all the way. He placed his business card on the counter. When you're ready to have a serious conversation about your future, call me. Pinnacle can take your brand national overnight. Think beyond this small operation, Mrs. Morgan. Why settle for Chicago when you could have New York, LA, Miami? After he left, Elaine found her hands shaking slightly. The encounter had left her feeling both offended and, paradoxically, flattered. That a national corporation would take interest in her small bakery was validation of everything she'd built. Yet Winters's assumption that she would sell, that everyone had their price, rankled deeply. She was still mulling over the interaction when Alex called later that afternoon. "I heard Winters paid you a visit," he said without preamble. "Are you all right?" "You have spies in my bakery now," she asked, only half joking. "Chicago's food world is surprisingly small. Word travels fast." His tone grew more serious. "Winters has a reputation for aggressive acquisitions. His standard approach is to buy small food businesses, dilute quality while maintaining the artisanal branding, then milk the reputation until consumers catch on." "How do you know so much about him?" A pause. "He approached my sister last year about her small winery in Sonoma. When she declined, things got unpleasant. Legal threats, pressure on her distributors." Elaine felt a chill. "You think he'd do the same to me?" "I think Winters represents everything that's wrong with corporate food culture. He sells the illusion of craftsmanship while destroying the real thing." Alex's voice softened. "Just be careful. Don't meet with him alone and have your lawyer review anything he sends you." "I wasn't planning to sell to him anyway," Elaine said, "but Catherine Hartwell's offer is tempting." "Catherine's one of the good ones. Old-school values, appreciates authenticity." He sounded relieved. "Listen, I have to run to a meeting, but would you be free for dinner tomorrow? There's something I'd like to discuss." The something turned out to be a proposal for a cookbook. Over pasta at a quiet neighborhood restaurant far from the upscale venues associated with Reed hospitality, Alex outlined the concept. A celebration of traditional bread-making methods, featuring your recipes and story. We'd hire a top food photographer, engage a good co-writer to help with the narrative portions. He paused, noting her expression. "You don't seem enthused." Elaine twirled pasta around her fork, buying time to organize her thoughts. "It feels like another step away from what I actually do, baking bread, and toward becoming some kind of brand." "Is that so terrible? Your methods deserve documentation, preservation?" "Maybe." She set down her fork. "But it's happening so fast. 6 months ago I was barely surviving baking in my apartment kitchen. Now I have a professional bakery, employees, contracts with upscale restaurants, grocery chains interested in distribution, and corporate sharks circling. Sometimes I barely recognize my own life." Alex's expression softened with understanding. "That kind of rapid change can be disorienting, even when it's positive. If you want to slow things down, just say the word." "It's not that simple." Elaine sighed. "I'm grateful for the opportunities, truly. But I keep wondering what Thomas would think of all this." "Your husband?" She nodded. "He always believed in me more than I believed in myself. Kept telling me I should open a proper bakery someday." A sad smile touched her lips. "But he also valued simplicity. Our best moments were the quietest ones. Sunday mornings with coffee and the paper, walks along the lake, evenings in the garden. Nothing grand or ambitious." Alex was quiet for a moment, studying her with an intensity that made her self-conscious. "What would make you happy, Elaine? Not what would make logical business sense, or what would honor your husband's memory, or what would please others. What do you want?" The question caught her off guard. I'm not sure anyone has asked me that in a very long time." "Then it's overdue." Elaine considered the question seriously, looking past the immediate complications to the heart of the matter. I want to make bread that matters to people, not just as a premium product for the wealthy, but as something that brings genuine joy and connection. The work itself fulfills me, the rhythms of it, the tactile nature, seeing the direct results of my labor. She paused, surprising herself with her next words. But I've also discovered I enjoy building something larger than myself. The bakery, the team we've assembled, there's satisfaction in creating not just bread but a workplace with meaning, where everyone contributes and feels valued. Alex nodded, seemingly pleased with her answer. Then the question becomes how to balance those desires. Growth doesn't have to mean losing your connection to the craft. Doesn't it, though? At some point, volume demands compromise. Not necessarily. There are models for scaling artisanal production that maintain integrity. He hesitated, then added, "Actually, I've been researching this extensively." Something in his tone made Elaine look at him more closely. "Why would you do that?" "Because I suspected this moment would come. The moment when you'd need to decide what kind of business you truly want to build." His expression was earnest, lacking the polished corporate veneer she'd first associated with him. "I didn't want you to feel trapped between surrendering to mass production or remaining too small to thrive." The realization that he had anticipated her concerns, had been preparing for them without presuming to dictate her choices, touched Elaine deeply. It suggested a level of thought and care that went beyond normal business relationships. "What would these models look like?" she asked. For the next hour, over dessert and coffee, they discussed possibilities, a network of small production bakeries rather than one large facility, apprenticeship programs to train bakers in traditional methods, community initiatives to make artisanal bread more accessible to lower-income neighborhoods. Alex had clearly given these ideas substantial thought, presenting various approaches that might align with Elaine's values while allowing for sustainable growth. By evening's end, Elaine felt both overwhelmed and exhilarated by the possibilities. "This is a lot to process," she admitted as they left the restaurant. "Take all the time you need." Alex's smile was warm in the gentle spring evening. "Your business decisions should reflect your vision, not anyone else's, including mine." The next morning, Walter joined Elaine for coffee at a cafe near her apartment, a weekly ritual they'd maintained despite her changed circumstances. She valued these connections to her previous life, the continuity they provided amid so much transformation. "You seem preoccupied," the old man observed, stirring honey into his tea. Elaine summarized her current dilemma: Hartwell's offer, Winters' unwelcome interest, Alex's proposed models for ethical growth, the cookbook possibility. "Sometimes I think I should have just kept baking in my apartment kitchen. Life was harder but simpler." Walter's eyes crinkled with gentle humor. "Was it, though? Simpler, yes, but better. You were one missed rent payment from homelessness, my dear." "I know, and I'm grateful for the security I have now." She traced the rim of her coffee cup thoughtfully. "But every opportunity seems to come with strings attached, expectations I'm not sure I want to meet." "Welcome to success," Walter said wryly. "It's rarely as straightforward as we imagine when we're struggling." He covered her hand with his weathered one. "But consider this. Each complication you're facing represents a choice. Not everyone gets to choose their path. Many simply take whatever road appears before them because they have no alternatives." The wisdom in his words settled over her. "I never thought I'd be in a position to turn down opportunities." "Precisely. And that itself is a kind of freedom." He squeezed her hand before releasing it. "Your Thomas would be proud of you, not just for building something successful, but for questioning what that success should look like." Later that day, as Elaine worked alongside Omar preparing dough for the next morning, her phone buzzed with a text from Alex. "Veronica mentioned you hadn't responded about the cookbook yet. No pressure. Just checking in." The message reminded her that despite their dinner conversation, Alex was still a businessman with projects and deadlines. The cookbook represented a commercial opportunity for Reed Hospitality as well as for her. It was easy to forget, in their increasingly personal interactions, that their relationship had begun as a business arrangement. "You are troubled," Omar observed, his perceptive eyes noting her distraction. "The bread knows." Elaine smiled at what had become his familiar refrain. "Just thinking about balance. How to grow without losing what matters." Omar nodded sagely. "In Damascus, my father faced this question. His bread became famous beyond our neighborhood. People would travel across the city to buy from him. He shaped a loaf with practiced hands. He was offered money to open many bakeries, to put his name on packages in stores. What did he do? He opened one more shop, just one. He trained my cousin to run it exactly as he would. Quality control, he called it." Omar smiled at the memory. When I asked why not more, he said, "A baker can only be in one place at a time. A baker's hands can only touch so much dough. Beyond that, you are no longer a baker. You are a businessman selling bread." His words resonated with something deep inside her. Your father was a wise man. He was, but also practical. The second shop provided for our family when times were difficult. There is wisdom in balance. Elaine considered this as she continued working, her hands finding comfort in the familiar rhythms of shaping dough. Perhaps the answer wasn't rejecting growth entirely, but defining its limits according to her own values rather than external expectations. That night, she called Alex. "About the cookbook," she said when he answered. "I'd like to discuss it further, but with some specific conditions." Spring turned to early summer, bringing longer days and a gentle warmth that transformed Chicago's parks and lakefront into vibrant social spaces. Elaine's business continued to thrive, with careful expansion that maintained her commitment to quality. She had accepted Hartwell's offer, with specific conditions about production volumes and methods that Catherine had readily embraced. The cookbook project was underway, though proceeding on Elaine's timeline rather than the more aggressive schedule originally proposed. Most significantly, she had made a decision about her long-term vision. Morgan's Bread would remain relatively small, focused on craft rather than volume. She would open 2 additional production locations, one on the north side and one in the western suburbs, each maintaining the same methods and standards as her original bakery. This network approach would allow for measured growth while ensuring she could personally oversee quality across all locations. Alex had supported her decision without reservation, even helping to identify suitable properties and navigate permitting processes. Their professional relationship had settled into a comfortable rhythm of mutual respect and open communication. Their personal relationship, however, remained in an undefined territory somewhere between friendship and something more, a possibility neither had directly acknowledged. On a warm Friday afternoon in June, Elaine was preparing to leave the bakery when her phone rang. The caller ID displayed Gregory Jenkins, Walter's nephew, and now her regular attorney. "Elaine," Gregory began without preamble, "I've just received some concerning documents from Pinnacle Foods. James Winters is claiming that your production methods infringe on a patent they hold for a traditional sourdough process they acquired last year." She sank into her office chair. "That's absurd. I'm using techniques that are centuries old. Exactly why this claim is ridiculous. But Winters isn't looking for legal victory. He's trying to force you to the negotiating table through expensive litigation. Classic intimidation tactic." Gregory's tone was grim. "I've seen this before. He's targeting you because you're small enough to pressure but successful enough to be worth acquiring. What are my options? We fight it, which will be costly but winnable. Or you capitulate and negotiate a sale, which I strongly advise against." He paused. "There might be a third option. Partnering with a larger entity that can absorb the legal costs and demonstrate that Winters is engaging in anti-competitive behavior. Elaine immediately thought of Alex, but hesitated to involve him further in her problems. "Let me think about this. How much time do we have?" "They've given us 10 business days to cease and desist or face formal legal action. Standard intimidation timeline." Gregory's voice softened slightly. "I know this is stressful, Elaine, but don't let Winters bully you. Your business practices are legitimate. We can fight this." After they hung up, Elaine sat motionless, absorbing the implications. Just when she'd found clarity about her path forward, this threat emerged. The injustice of it, that a corporation could weaponize the legal system against a small business simply to force an acquisition, filled her with a cold anger. Her first instinct was to call Alex, but she resisted. Their relationship had become increasingly important to her, evolving from gratitude to genuine connection. She didn't want him to see her solely as a business problem to solve. Instead, she called Catherine Hartwell, who responded with immediate practical support. "This is exactly the kind of corporate thuggery I despise," Catherine declared after hearing the situation. "Hartwell's has dealt with similar threats. I'll have our legal team contact Gregory first thing Monday. In the meantime, document everything about your processes, where you learned them, historical references, anything that proves these are traditional methods that predate any patent." The support bolstered Elaine's resolve. By the time she left the bakery, she had formulated a plan to fight Winters's claim rather than succumb to intimidation. The weekend stretched before her, time to research, document, and prepare for the battle ahead. She was so absorbed in these thoughts that she almost missed the familiar figure waiting near her car. "Alex?" She stopped short, surprised to see him leaning against the building, casual in jeans and a light sweater despite coming from work. "What are you doing here? I thought you might need a friend tonight." His expression was concerned but warm. "Gregory Jenkins called me." A flicker of annoyance sparked. "He shouldn't have done that without my permission." "Don't blame Gregory. I asked him to keep me informed about any legal issues that might affect your business." At her raised eyebrow, he added, "Insurance policy of sorts. Reed Hospitality has significant investments in your success, remember?" The explanation made sense from a business perspective, but something in his tone suggested there was more to it. Elaine unlocked her car, buying time to process her mixed feelings about his involvement. "I was heading home to work on documentation for the case," she said finally. "All the more reason you need dinner first. Proper fuel for the fight ahead." His smile was encouraging. "I know a place nearby. Good food, quiet atmosphere, no business associates likely to interrupt." The prospect of facing the evening alone with her worries suddenly seemed less appealing than sharing a meal with Alex. "All right," she agreed, "but I'm driving myself. I'll follow you." The restaurant was a small Italian place tucked away on a side street, warm brick walls and soft lighting creating an intimate atmosphere without pretension. The owner greeted Alex by name, leading them to a corner table partially screened by a trellis covered with artificial grapevines, kitschy but effective at creating privacy. Once they were settled with wine and appetizers, Alex addressed the issue directly. "Gregory filled me in about Winters's patent claim. It's baseless, of course, but potentially damaging in the short term. Catherine Hartwell is involving her legal team. I'm not without resources." Elaine's tone was more defensive than she'd intended. Alex regarded her thoughtfully. "You're angry that I found out before you told me." "Not angry, just—" She searched for the right word. "Protective of my independence. I've come to rely on you a great deal already. And that bothers you?" "Sometimes." She met his gaze directly. "I was barely surviving when we met. Everything I have now, the bakery, the staff, the contracts, stems from your initial investment. I'm profoundly grateful, but also aware of the imbalance between us." Alex considered this, twirling his wine glass slowly. "I understand. But consider this perspective. Partnerships, whether business or personal, are rarely perfectly balanced at every moment. The scale tips one way, then another over time. This feels like a significant imbalance. Perhaps. But remember that I didn't invest in your business out of charity or pity, Elaine. I invested because I recognized value and potential, which you've more than validated through your success. He leaned forward slightly. My contribution was financial. Yours has been the vision, the expertise, the daily commitment to excellence that makes the bread what it is. His words eased something in her. Thank you for that. I needed the reminder. As they continued their meal, the conversation shifted to more personal topics. Books they'd recently read, a documentary series Alex had found fascinating, Elaine's tentative exploration of container gardening on her small balcony. The legal threat receded temporarily, allowing space for the companionable connection that had been developing between them. Over dessert, a tiramisu they shared between them, Alex grew more reflective. I've been meaning to tell you something about why your bread affected me so strongly that first day. Elaine set down her fork, recognizing the seriousness in his tone. My mother's death when I was 12, it wasn't just cancer. It was suicide. The revelation hung in the air between them, heavy with implications. Alex, I'm so sorry. He nodded, acknowledging her sympathy. The cancer was terminal, but not immediately so. She might have had 6 months, maybe a year. But the pain, the loss of autonomy, she couldn't bear it. She chose her exit on her terms. His voice remained steady, though emotion flickered behind his carefully controlled expression. The last thing she baked was sourdough bread. I found her in the kitchen that morning, the loaves cooling on the rack. She'd waited until they were done before she took the pills. Elaine reached across the table, covering his hand with hers. For years I couldn't even look at sourdough without feeling physically ill, he continued. Then that day outside the daily grind, when you mentioned baking bread from your kitchen to their counter, something resonated. Later, when I tasted your sourdough at Marco's Cafe, he paused. It was the first time since my mother died that bread brought comfort instead of pain. Something about the specific flavor profile, the texture. It was different enough from hers to be distinct, but similar enough to connect me to those earlier, happier memories before everything went wrong. Is that why you invested? Because my bread helped heal an old wound? There was no accusation in her question, only a desire to understand. Partly. But not in the way you might think. Alex turned his hand beneath hers, intertwining their fingers in a gesture that felt surprisingly natural. It made me realize how powerful food memories can be, how something as simple as bread can carry meaning beyond sustenance. Your dedication to traditional methods, to quality without compromise. It aligned with values I'd lost sight of in building Reed Hospitality. He seemed to struggle with his next words. My father transformed our family business from a high-quality, personally managed hotel group into an aggressively expanding corporate entity that prioritized profits over people. After his mismanagement nearly destroyed everything, I spent years rebuilding, focusing on financial stability, consistent growth. Somewhere along the way, I started to measure success the same way he had, by numbers rather than meaning. Understanding dawned on Elaine. And my bread reminded you of another way to define success. Exactly. Quality over quantity, tradition, craftsmanship. His smile held a touch of self-deprecation. Perhaps I've been trying to redeem the Reed name, to reconcile my grandfather's vision with my own corporate path. The revelation illuminated so much about Alex's involvement in her business, his insistence on maintaining traditional methods, his research into ethical growth models. This wasn't merely a CEO's project, but something deeply personal, a way of reconnecting with values he feared he'd compromised. Thank you for telling me, she said softly. It helps me understand. The drive back to her apartment was quiet, both of them processing the evening's revelations. When Alex walked her to her door, there was a moment, brief but electric, when Elaine thought he might kiss her. Instead, he squeezed her hand gently. "Get some rest. Monday will be soon enough to battle legal dragons." Saturday morning found Elaine in her kitchen, baking for pleasure rather than commerce, something she hadn't done in months. As she shaped a loaf with practiced hands, she reflected on Alex's story. The image of a young boy finding his mother's final bread still warm, while her body grew cold nearby. It explained so much about the complexity she'd sensed in him from the beginning. Her phone's ring interrupted these thoughts. The screen showed an unfamiliar number. "Mrs. Morgan?" A woman's voice, professionally pleasant. "This is Sandra Wilkins from the Chicago Tribune. I'm calling about the patent infringement claim Pinnacle Foods has filed against your company. Would you care to comment?" Elaine's stomach dropped. "How did you hear about that? The claim was just filed." "We received a press packet from Pinnacle's media relations team yesterday evening. They're positioning this as a consumer protection issue, ensuring that authentic artisanal processes are properly regulated." The reporter's tone suggested skepticism. "Given your rising profile in Chicago's food scene, we'd like to include your perspective." The realization that Winters had escalated to media manipulation even before legal proceedings began sent a wave of cold anger through Elaine. "Ms. Wilkins, the claim is completely baseless. I'd be happy to provide a formal statement later today after consulting with my attorney." "Of course. I should mention that Mr. Winters specifically referenced your partnership with Reed Hospitality Group, suggesting that a corporate titan is attempting to appropriate traditional baking methods through your small business. It's quite a narrative they're constructing. So that was Winters' strategy, painting her as a corporate pawn while positioning Pinnacle as a defender of tradition. The irony was breathtaking. After promising to email a statement by afternoon, Elaine immediately called Gregory, then Alex, updating them on this new development. Within an hour, an emergency meeting was convened at Reed Hospitality's offices, with Catherine Hartwell joining by video conference. What had begun as a simple intimidation tactic was rapidly evolving into a public relations battle that could damage not only Morgan's Bread but potentially Reed Hospitality and Hartwell's markets as well. As Elaine entered the conference room where the others waited, she steeled herself for the fight ahead, drawing strength from an unexpected source, the anger that had replaced her initial fear. James Winters had misjudged her if he thought she would surrender her hard-won success without a battle. He might have corporate resources on his side, but she had something more powerful, the truth about her bread, her methods, and now, the understanding of exactly why it mattered so much, not just to her customers, but to the people who had become her allies and friends. The strategy meeting at Reed Hospitality progressed with the focused intensity of a military operation. Veronica had transformed the conference room into a command center, with multiple screens displaying news coverage, social media trends, and market analyses. Besides Elaine, Alex, and Gregory, the team included Reed Hospitality's head of public relations, Catherine's legal counsel via video conference, and a patent attorney specializing in food industry disputes. Winters is counting on overwhelming a small business with legal costs and negative publicity, explained Patricia Donovan, Reed's PR director. He's framing this as David versus Goliath, with you cast as the corporate pawn and Pinnacle as the defender of tradition. She shook her head at the audacity. The projection is almost impressive. The patent attorney, Martin Goldstein, elaborated on the legal specifics. Their patent is for a proprietary sourdough fermentation process incorporating temperature-controlled environments and specific bacterial cultures. It's vague enough to create confusion, but specific enough to have been granted protection. He adjusted his glasses. The good news is that prior art, evidence that the method existed before the patent, will invalidate their claim. The bad news is that proving prior art can be expensive and time-consuming. I have documentation going back to my grandmother's recipes from the 1940s, Elaine offered, and her starter itself is over 30 years old. Excellent start, Martin nodded. We'll need more publications, historical records, expert testimonials. Gregory tapped his tablet. I've already reached out to several culinary historians and traditional baking experts. Many are outraged by Pinnacle's claim and willing to provide statements. That addresses the legal front, Catherine said from the screen. But we also need a public response. Consumers don't understand patent law, but they understand authenticity. We need to shift the narrative. Patricia outlined a multi-pronged approach. A strong statement for the Tribune, direct engagement with food bloggers and influencers who had previously featured Morgan's bread, and a social media campaign focusing on Elaine's traditional methods and family heritage. The key is transparency, she emphasized. We open the bakery to selected media, demonstrate the processes, show that there's nothing proprietary or secret, just traditional methods passed down through generations. Alex, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke. Winters isn't just targeting Elaine. This is a test case for him. If he succeeds in bullying Morgan's bread, he'll move on to other artisanal producers. His expression hardened. We need to make this so publicly and legally painful for him that he thinks twice before trying again. How? Elaine asked. A subtle smile crossed Alex's face. By turning this into exactly what it is. A story about corporate overreach threatening traditional craftsmanship. Pinnacle wants to own methods that bakers have used for centuries. That's not just a threat to your business, Elaine. It's a threat to cultural heritage. The counteroffensive began the following day with Elaine's statement to the Tribune. Rather than a defensive denial, it was a passionate affirmation of bread-making traditions that transcended corporate ownership. The methods I use were taught to me by my grandmother, who learned them from her mother. These techniques have been practiced by bakers for centuries across cultures and continents. No corporation can claim ownership of humanity's shared culinary heritage. Morgan's Bread stands proudly with all artisanal bakers who honor traditional craftsmanship over industrial shortcuts. The statement resonated beyond the initial article, picked up by food blogs and industry publications. By midweek, Just Bread is Cultural Heritage was trending on social media, with bakers across the country posting videos of their sourdough processes in solidarity. Catherine Hartwell released a strongly worded statement supporting Morgan's Bread and condemning attempts to privatize traditional knowledge. Most powerful was a video tour of Elaine's bakery, live-streamed and later posted across multiple platforms. She demonstrated each step of her process, explaining techniques passed down through her family while subtly highlighting the absurdity of claiming these methods as proprietary innovations. "This is how my grandmother taught me to test if the starter is active," she explained, showing how the bubble-filled mixture floated in water. Bakers have been using this test since long before plastic containers or digital thermometers existed. Omar added particular credibility when he demonstrated parallel techniques from Syrian baking traditions. "Different cultures, same principles," he noted. "The relationship between flour, water, salt, and time is universal." The response was immediate and overwhelmingly positive. Food writers, professional bakers, and home cooking enthusiasts rallied behind Morgan's Bread. Several prominent chefs publicly questioned whether they should continue using Pinnacle products in their restaurants. A James Beard Award-winning baker organized an open letter signed by over 200 professionals rejecting the notion that traditional methods could be patented. Meanwhile, Gregory and Martin assembled a formidable legal case, gathering affidavits from culinary historians, documentation from bread-making texts dating back centuries, and testimony from generations of bakers who had used similar techniques long before Pinnacle's patent. By Friday, Winters attempted to regain control of the narrative with a press release describing Pinnacle's significant investments in food science innovation and suggesting that Morgan's Bread was attempting to avoid proper licensing through a publicity campaign. The statement fell flat, with food media outlets noting that it failed to address the central question of how one company could claim ownership of methods documented across countless cultures for millennia. Throughout the whirlwind week, Elaine found unexpected strength in the crisis. The initial fear had given way to righteous determination as she realized this fight extended beyond her business to principles she deeply valued. Alex remained steadfastly supportive without overshadowing her role as the bakery's defender and public face. Saturday evening, after the most exhausting and exhilarating week of her professional life, Elaine found herself at Alex's home. What had begun as a quick strategy meeting evolved into an impromptu dinner as they both realized neither had eaten properly all day. "You were magnificent this week," Alex said as they sat on his terrace, the city skyline shimmering before them in the summer twilight. Winters never expected such a forceful response. Elaine sipped her wine, allowing herself to relax for the first time in days. "I surprised myself, honestly. A year ago, I would have crumbled under that kind of pressure." "I don't believe that. You survived losing your husband, losing your job, near homelessness, all while maintaining your dignity and craft. You've always had this strength." His assessment warmed her in ways the wine couldn't. "Perhaps, but it's easier to find courage when you're not fighting alone." Alex's gaze was thoughtful. "That's something I've had to learn. For years after taking over the company, I thought leadership meant shouldering every burden myself." His smile held a touch of self-deprecation. "Turns out that's the fastest path to isolation and burnout." A comfortable silence settled between them as they watched the city lights brighten against the deepening blue of evening. Elaine was acutely aware of how natural it felt to be here with him. How easily they had moved from formal business interactions to something more personal and nuanced. "I keep thinking about what you said about your mother," she said finally. "About the bread she baked that last morning." Alex stilled, waiting for her to continue. "It must have been her final act of love, making sure you had that comfort, something of her craftsmanship to hold on to." He looked away, but not before she glimpsed unexpected emotion in his eyes. "I never thought of it that way," he said quietly. "For years, I only saw the manipulation, that she used the bread to keep me occupied while she—" He couldn't finish the sentence. Elaine reached for his hand, a gesture that had become increasingly natural between them. Perhaps it was both. People can hold contradictory impulses, especially in extremis. "You would have liked her, I think. Before the illness." A small smile softened his features. "She had strong opinions about proper bread. Store-bought was an insult to flour, according to her. A woman after my own heart." His eyes met hers with sudden intensity. "Yes, I believe she would have thought so too." The moment stretched between them, heavy with unspoken possibilities. Elaine found herself wondering what it would be like to kiss him, then immediately felt a stab of guilt, as if she were betraying Thomas. Alex seemed to sense her conflict. He squeezed her hand gently before releasing it, breaking the tension. "More wine?" She nodded, grateful for the momentary reprieve from emotions she wasn't quite ready to confront. Sunday morning brought unexpected news. Gregory called while Elaine was preparing breakfast, his voice uncharacteristically animated. "Pinnacle's stock dropped 15% since the controversy began," he reported. "Their major retail partners are asking questions about the patent situation, and 3 restaurant groups have suspended purchasing agreements pending resolution." "That seems like a strong reaction to one small bakery dispute," Elaine remarked, genuinely surprised. "It's not just about your case anymore. Food journalists have started investigating Pinnacle's other proprietary processes. Turns out they've been quietly threatening several small producers with similar patent claims. You were just the first to fight back publicly." The implications were significant. So Winters miscalculated. Spectacularly. Gregory sounded satisfied. "My sources say Pinnacle's board is meeting in emergency session today. They're not happy with the negative publicity." By Monday morning, the landscape had shifted dramatically. Winters requested a private meeting with Elaine and her legal representatives. In Reed Hospitality's conference room, the Pinnacle CEO presented a very different demeanor from his earlier arrogance. After further review, we believe there may have been some overreach in our patent enforcement strategy, he stated carefully. Pinnacle is prepared to issue a formal acknowledgement that traditional sourdough methods exist in the public domain and are not covered by our patent. Gregory leaned forward. And the cease and desist order? Withdrawn, effective immediately. Winters forced a thin smile. We would appreciate a joint statement indicating that our disagreement has been amicably resolved. No admission of wrongdoing? No compensation for damages to my client's reputation? Gregory's tone remained pleasant but unyielding. Winters stiffened. Our legal position remains defensible. This gesture is offered in good faith to resolve an unfortunate misunderstanding. Misunderstanding? Elaine couldn't contain her disbelief. You attempted to appropriate traditional knowledge that belongs to all bakers, threatened my livelihood, and deliberately created a media narrative painting me as a corporate thief. And you call that a misunderstanding? Mrs. Morgan, Ms. Morgan, she corrected automatically. Ms. Morgan, Winters amended. Business is often competitive. Perhaps my approach was overzealous, but the alternative is protracted litigation that benefits neither of us. Alex, who had been observing silently, finally spoke. Actually, James, I think continued litigation might benefit the entire artisanal food community by establishing clear precedent about the unpatentability of traditional methods. Perhaps we should proceed to court after all. The subtle threat achieved its purpose. By afternoon, Pinnacle had agreed to a settlement that included a public retraction, financial compensation for Morgan's Bread's legal expenses, and a binding agreement never to pursue similar claims against traditional baking methods. As they left the final settlement meeting, Alex turned to Elaine with undisguised admiration. You realize what you've accomplished? You've not only protected your business but created a shield for countless other small producers who couldn't have fought this battle themselves. The realization was just beginning to sink in. I didn't set out to become an activist for artisanal food rights. The best advocates rarely do. They simply stand firm for what they believe in when it matters most. His smile held warmth and something deeper, a respect that transcended their business relationship. Thomas would be incredibly proud of you today. The mention of her husband, offered with such genuine understanding, touched Elaine deeply. Thank you for that. I think he would be. As they walked together toward the elevators, their shoulders occasionally brushing, Elaine reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From desperate widow baking bread in a dilapidated apartment to defender of traditional craftsmanship against corporate overreach, it was a transformation she could never have imagined. Yet somehow, despite all the changes, she felt more authentically herself than she had in years. Glancing at Alex, she wondered if he had experienced a similar journey, finding his way back to values and connections that corporate success had temporarily obscured. The thought created a sense of kinship that went beyond their business partnership or growing personal attraction. They had each, in their way, rediscovered essential truths about themselves through bread, its making, its meaning, and the human connections it fostered. The victory over Pinnacle Foods transformed Morgan's Bread in ways Elaine couldn't have anticipated. What began as a defensive struggle against corporate intimidation had elevated her modest bakery to a symbol of artisanal integrity. Food journalists sought interviews, culinary schools requested guest lectures, and established bakers reached out with messages of gratitude and solidarity. The publicity generated customer interest that far exceeded her production capacity. Even with her planned expansion to 2 additional locations, Elaine couldn't hope to meet the demand. It was a problem of success she had never imagined facing. We could license your methods and recipes to other bakeries, suggested Patricia during a strategy meeting at Reed Hospitality in late July. Create a network of certified Morgan's Bread producers who adhere to your standards. Elaine shook her head. That's essentially franchising. It would require constant oversight to maintain quality, which defeats the purpose of staying small and hands-on. What about training programs? Alex proposed. Classes where home bakers and professionals could learn your techniques without any expectation that they'd produce official Morgan's bread. The idea resonated immediately. A bread school? Elaine considered the possibility. Teaching rather than scaling production, that could work. Catherine Hartwell, joining via video conference, built on the concept. We could host workshops in our store's demonstration kitchens. It would bring customers in while supporting your educational mission. The synergy was perfect, addressing public interest in Elaine's methods without compromising her commitment to quality or personal involvement. By August, she had developed a curriculum and scheduled the first series of classes in partnership with Hartwell's flagship store. Meanwhile, construction progressed on her new North Side bakery location. Elaine had found herself unexpectedly enjoying the design process, working with Gabriela Ortiz, the architect she'd met at Alex's dinner party, to create a space that honored traditional methods while incorporating thoughtful modern elements. Bakeries are sacred spaces, Gabriela had observed during their initial planning session. Like cathedrals or theaters, they transform raw materials into something that nourishes both body and spirit. That perspective informed every aspect of the design. Abundant natural light, a layout that allowed customers to observe the baking process, materials that would develop character with age and use. The production area featured a stone hearth oven, a significant investment but one Elaine considered essential for maintaining the quality that had defined her bread. Omar would manage this new location, with Maya assisting and training 2 new bakers. Elaine had been pleasantly surprised by her own comfort with delegation. A year ago, she would have insisted on overseeing every detail herself. Now she recognized that trusting her well-trained team freed her to focus on developing new recipes and teaching methods that would otherwise be lost to time. On a personal level, her relationship with Alex continued to evolve in ways neither had explicitly acknowledged. They met regularly for dinner or walks along the lakefront, conversations flowing easily between business matters and increasingly personal topics. He had become not just a business partner but a confidant and friend, perhaps more, though neither had taken definitive steps beyond friendship. One warm August evening, they sat on a bench overlooking Lake Michigan, watching sailboats catch the last golden light. Alex had just returned from a business trip to New York, and they were catching up on developments during his absence. "The cookbook photographer wants to schedule the final shoot next week," Elaine was saying. "Apparently, fall light has the perfect quality for bread photography." Alex nodded, though he seemed distracted. "That sounds fine. And I'm thinking of adding a line of artisanal dog biscuits. Maybe cat treats, too. Possibly some for hamsters. Good idea." He was gazing at the horizon, clearly not listening. Elaine nudged his shoulder gently. "I'm also considering a career change, thinking of becoming a professional skydiver." That got his attention. "What?" He turned to her, confused, then sheepish as he realized his inattention. "I'm sorry. I was miles away." "Evidently. Is everything all right? You've been preoccupied since you got back from New York." Alex hesitated, then reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a folded newspaper clipping. "This ran in the New York Times business section yesterday." Elaine smoothed out the paper. The headline read, "Reed Hospitality Group in talks for potential acquisition by Global Leisure Consortium." Beneath it, a photo showed Alex shaking hands with an older man identified as Harold Blackwood, CEO of GLC. "You're selling the company?" She couldn't keep the shock from her voice. "Not exactly. It's complicated." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she'd come to recognize as a sign of inner conflict. "GLC has made an extremely generous offer to acquire a controlling interest in Reed Hospitality. They would maintain the brand identity, and I would remain as CEO for at least 3 years. But ultimately, it wouldn't be yours anymore." No. The word held a finality that seemed to surprise even him. Elaine studied him carefully. This isn't just a business decision for you. Reed Hospitality is your family's legacy, your grandfather's creation that you rescued from your father's mismanagement. It's personal. It is, he admitted, but sometimes personal attachment clouds business judgment. The offer is exceptional. Our shareholders would receive a substantial premium. Our employees would have greater opportunities within a global organization. Our properties would benefit from increased resources for renovation and marketing. All logical points that don't explain why you look like you haven't slept since making this decision. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. When did you get so good at reading me? Practice, she replied simply. Why is this happening now? Alex was quiet for a moment, gathering his thoughts. Our recent financial performance has been the strongest in company history. Skyline has garnered international attention and multiple awards. Our smaller boutique properties are outperforming projections. It's made us an attractive acquisition target. And you're considering it because it might be the responsible choice. He turned to face her directly. The truth is, Elaine, I've been reevaluating many aspects of my life lately. What I want, what truly matters to me. This opportunity forces a decision about whether leading Reed Hospitality is still central to my identity and purpose. The implications hung between them, unspoken, but palpable. Alex wasn't just reconsidering his professional future, but his personal priorities as well. Have you made a decision? She asked, her heart beating unexpectedly faster. Not yet. The board is reviewing the offer. I have a few weeks before needing to make a formal recommendation. His eyes held hers. I wanted to talk to you about it because your perspective matters to me, and because any decision I make would inevitably affect our partnership. The careful choice of words, partnership rather than relationship, maintained the ambiguity that had characterized their connection. They had been circling each other for months, neither quite ready to define what was developing between them. I'm honored that you'd value my input, she said carefully, but this has to be your decision, Alex. Only you know what will bring you peace. He nodded, looking back toward the lake. When my father was running the company into the ground, I made a promise to myself that I would restore what my grandfather built, that I would protect his legacy at all costs. That mission has defined my adult life. He paused. But lately I've been wondering if I've fulfilled that promise already, and if it's time to define success differently. As they sat together in companionable silence, watching darkness settle over the water, Elaine reflected on her own journey of redefining success. From survival to stability, from isolation to community, from grief to, not happiness exactly, but a renewed capacity for joy and connection. The thought of Alex potentially making a life-changing decision partially influenced by his feelings for her was both exhilarating and terrifying. Their evening ended without resolution, each lost in private thoughts about possible futures. The next morning, however, brought unexpected developments that temporarily pushed these personal considerations aside. Elaine arrived at the bakery to find an elegant older woman waiting outside the locked door, a taxi idling at the curb behind her. Impeccably dressed in a linen suit that spoke of old money and refined taste, the stranger might have stepped from the pages of a society magazine. Ms. Morgan? The woman extended a gloved hand. Evelyn Bennett. I apologize for arriving before your opening hours, but I have a rather urgent matter to discuss. Confused but intrigued, Elaine invited her inside. I'm afraid we're still preparing for the day. The bread won't be ready for another hour. I'm not here for bread, my dear, though I've heard yours is exceptional. Evelyn settled into a chair with the practiced ease of someone accustomed to commanding attention. I'm here because of my grandson. Your grandson? Alexander Reed. Elaine nearly dropped the keys she'd been holding. You're Alex's grandmother? His paternal grandmother, yes. The woman's piercing blue eyes, so similar to Alex's, studied Elaine with disconcerting intensity. "He doesn't know I'm here, and I would prefer to keep it that way for the moment." An uncomfortable suspicion formed in Elaine's mind. "Mrs. Bennet, if you're here to discuss Alex's business decisions—" "I'm here to discuss my husband's legacy," Evelyn interrupted smoothly. "Harold Reed built Reed Hospitality from nothing. One small hotel in downtown Chicago, purchased when the neighborhood was considered undesirable. He had vision, could see potential where others saw only risk. Alex has told me about his grandfather. He clearly admires him greatly. As he should. Harold was an extraordinary man. But what Alexander may not have told you is that the company was never meant to be a publicly traded entity detached from family values. My husband believed in personal service, in knowing his guests' names and stories, in creating spaces that felt like beautifully appointed homes rather than commercial properties." Elaine nodded slowly, beginning to understand. "You're concerned about the potential sale to Global Leisure Consortium." A flicker of surprise crossed Evelyn's composed features. "He's discussed it with you, then?" "He mentioned it yesterday. He hasn't made a decision yet. But he's considering it." The statement carried a weight of disappointment. "I feared as much. The board sees only numbers. Return on investment, shareholder value. They don't understand what would be lost." Elaine chose her words carefully. "I think Alex understands very well what's at stake, both financially and in terms of his family's legacy. It's precisely because he cares so deeply that this decision is difficult for him. Then perhaps you might help him remember what Reed Hospitality truly represents." Evelyn's gaze was direct, almost challenging. "My husband believed that a hotel should nourish the spirit as well as shelter the body. Not unlike your bread, I imagine." The parallel was unexpected but not inaccurate. "Mrs. Bennet, I respect your concern for your husband's legacy, but this has to be Alex's decision. I won't attempt to influence him based on a private conversation with you." Instead of taking offense, Evelyn smiled for the first time, a genuine expression that softened her aristocratic features. "Good answer. I would have been disappointed if you'd agreed too readily." She rose with elegant economy of movement. "I should leave you to your work. The bread won't bake itself after all." At the door, she turned back. "One last thing, Ms. Morgan. My grandson has changed since meeting you. There's a light in his eyes I haven't seen in many years, not since before my daughter-in-law's illness." Her expression grew serious again. "Whatever happens with the company, please don't underestimate your importance in Alexander's life." With that enigmatic parting statement, she was gone, leaving Elaine staring after her in bewilderment. The encounter had lasted less than 15 minutes but had raised questions that would linger much longer. What exactly was Evelyn Bennet hoping to accomplish? And how should Elaine interpret her final comment about Alex? The day proceeded with its usual rhythms: dough to shape, ovens to monitor, customers to serve. But Elaine's thoughts kept returning to both last night's conversation with Alex and this morning's strange meeting with his grandmother. Major changes seemed to be hovering on the horizon, affecting not just their professional relationship, but the complex personal connection that had been developing between them. Days passed, and Elaine said nothing to Alex about Evelyn's visit. It wasn't her place to reveal this unexpected intervention, though the unshared knowledge weighed on her. She found herself studying him more carefully during their interactions, looking for signs of the internal struggle his grandmother had described. The Northside Bakery opened to enthusiastic crowds in early September, with a line stretching around the block on opening day. Gabriella's design had exceeded expectations, light-filled, warm, and functional without being sterile. Omar moved through the space with natural authority, already training his team to maintain the exacting standards that defined Morgan's Bread. Elaine's teaching program had proven equally successful. Her first workshop at Hartwell's demonstration kitchen sold out within hours of being announced. Subsequent sessions were expanded to accommodate demand, with participants ranging from culinary students to retirees reclaiming traditional skills their grandparents had practiced. "You're a natural teacher," Catherine observed after watching Elaine guide 12 eager students through the intricacies of properly developing gluten. "You explain complex processes in accessible terms without dumbing them down." Elaine hadn't anticipated how much satisfaction she would derive from sharing her knowledge. There was something deeply gratifying about watching comprehension dawn as she demonstrated techniques, the moment when hands that had been clumsy with dough began to develop the right touch through practice and guidance. "My grandmother would be pleased," she told Catherine. "She always said knowledge not shared was bread allowed to mold." One crisp Tuesday morning in mid-September, Elaine arrived at the original bakery to find Alex waiting outside. This in itself wasn't unusual. They often met for coffee before starting their respective workdays. What gave her pause was his expression, simultaneously determined and uncertain, like a man who had made a momentous decision but wasn't entirely confident in it. "You're here early," she greeted him, unlocking the door. The familiar scents of flour and sourdough starter greeted them, comforting Constance in a world of variables. "I couldn't sleep." He followed her inside, declining her offer of coffee with a small shake of his head. "The board votes tomorrow on the GLC offer." Elaine set her bag down, giving him her full attention. "And your recommendation?" "That's what I wanted to discuss with you." He paced the small office restlessly. "I've spent weeks analyzing this from every angle. Financial projections, market trends, employee impact assessments. Everything points to accepting the offer. It's objectively the right business decision. But I keep coming back to one question. What would my grandfather do?" He stopped pacing, turning to face her. "I've been telling myself that protecting his legacy means maximizing the company's financial success and stability. Now I'm not so sure." Elaine considered her words carefully, mindful of Evelyn's unsolicited intervention. "What do you know about his original vision for Reed Hospitality?" He wanted to create spaces where travelers felt genuinely welcome, personal, distinctive properties rather than cookie-cutter hotel rooms. Alex's expression softened with memory. He knew every employee by name, remembered returning guests' preferences. Quality over quantity was his mantra. Does GLC share that philosophy? They claim they do. Their offer emphasizes maintaining Reed's brand identity and values. His tone suggested skepticism. But their business model is fundamentally about scale and standardization, efficiencies that inevitably come at the cost of the personal touch. Elaine moved to the small kitchen area, beginning her morning ritual of checking the sourdough starter. The familiar task centered her as she considered how to respond. "When I was deciding whether to expand Morgan's Bread, you helped me find a path that honored my values while allowing for sustainable growth. You didn't impose your vision but helped me clarify my own. And I appreciated that approach. Then perhaps that's the gift I can offer in return, not telling you what to do but helping you reconnect with your own deepest values." She looked up from the starter, meeting his eyes directly. "If money weren't a factor, if this were solely about your personal fulfillment and honoring your grandfather, what would you choose?" The question hung between them, simple yet profound. Alex's expression shifted as he considered it, layers of professional calculation falling away to reveal something more fundamental. "I would keep the company," he said finally. "Not just maintain it, but transform it. Return to smaller, more distinctive properties focused on exceptional experiences rather than maximum revenue per room." His voice gained conviction as he continued. "I've been pursuing growth because that's what successful businesses do. They get bigger. But what if success could be defined differently?" The parallels to Elaine's own journey were striking. Like a baker choosing to make exceptional bread for fewer people rather than mediocre bread for many. "Exactly." He moved closer, his energy changing from restless uncertainty to focused clarity. This isn't just about my grandfather's legacy anymore. It's about the kind of work that gives my life meaning, creating experiences that matter rather than simply accumulating profit. Elaine felt a surge of admiration for his willingness to question conventional measures of success. That sounds like a decision you won't regret, regardless of what the spreadsheets say. The board won't like it. Several members have been vocally supportive of the acquisition. Then you'll need to make a compelling case based on more than nostalgia or personal preference. A vision for Reed Hospitality's future that offers an alternative path to sustainable prosperity. Alex studied her with that intense focus she had come to know so well. You know, you'd make an excellent business strategist if you ever get tired of baking. I'll stick with bread, thank you very much. She smiled, relieved to see determination replacing doubt in his expression. But I'm happy to be a sounding board whenever you need one. An unexpected vulnerability crossed his features. I'll need more than that, Elaine. If I do this, if I push back against the acquisition and propose an alternative vision, I'll be taking significant professional risk. I'd like to know— He hesitated, uncharacteristically uncertain. I'd like to know that whatever happens with Reed Hospitality, what's developing between us won't be affected. The directness of the statement, the first explicit acknowledgement of their evolving relationship, caught her off guard. Alex, I know the timing is terrible, he continued quickly. I'm not asking for declarations or commitments, just clarity that this connection we have isn't dependent on our business relationship. Elaine's heart beat faster as she considered his words. The truth was, her feelings for Alex had grown steadily more complex and profound over the months they'd known each other. What had begun as gratitude had evolved into respect, then friendship, and gradually something deeper neither had been quite ready to name. Our connection has never been primarily about business, she said carefully. At least not for me, not for a long time. Relief and something warmer flickered in his eyes. That's good to know. The moment was interrupted by the arrival of Javier, the first of her staff to arrive each morning. Alex stepped back, the intimate atmosphere dissipating as the bakery's daily rhythm began to assert itself. I should go. Board presentation to finalize. He moved toward the door, then turned back. Dinner tonight? I'll let you know how it goes. I'd like that. After he left, Elaine moved through her morning tasks with practiced efficiency, though her mind kept returning to their conversation. Alex was preparing to make a momentous professional decision, partially influenced by values she had helped him reconnect with. The responsibility of that influence wasn't lost on her. By early afternoon, she could no longer maintain her silence about Evelyn's visit. Whatever Alex decided, he deserved complete transparency from her. She called his office only to learn from Veronica that he was locked in preparations with his executive team and unavailable. It's important, Elaine insisted. Personal, not business. I understand, Veronica replied, her tone softening slightly. He should be finished around 4. I'll make sure he calls you then. But 4 o'clock came and went without contact. Elaine tried his cell phone, which went straight to voicemail. By closing time, she had resigned herself to waiting until their dinner to share Evelyn's intervention. She was just locking up when a town car pulled up outside the bakery. The driver opened the rear door and Evelyn Bennett emerged, as elegantly attired as during their previous meeting, but noticeably more tense. Ms. Morgan, I apologize for arriving unannounced again. Despite her composed words, there was unmistakable distress in her bearing. I've been trying to reach Alexander all afternoon without success. I've had the same experience, Elaine admitted, unlocking the bakery door to allow them privacy. Is something wrong? Potentially, yes. Evelyn followed her inside, declining the offered seat. I've just learned that several board members have been meeting privately with GLC executives, discussing terms beyond those in the formal offer, including Alexander's eventual replacement as CEO, despite the 3-year guarantee in the public proposal. The revelation sent a cold spike of concern through Elaine. "That's duplicitous. It's business," Evelyn replied grimly. "At least a certain kind of business. My husband would have called it dishonorable." She straightened her already impeccable posture. "Alexander needs this information before tomorrow's vote, but he's not answering my calls. I thought perhaps he might respond to you. I've been trying to reach him too, actually, to tell him about your visit last week." Seeing confusion in Evelyn's expression, Elaine explained, "I felt uncomfortable keeping our conversation from him, especially since he's making such an important decision." Understanding dawned in the older woman's eyes. "You truly care for him, don't you?" "I do." The simple admission felt both terrifying and liberating. Evelyn nodded, as if confirming a private hypothesis. "Then we must find him. Tonight." As if summoned by their concern, Elaine's phone rang. Alex's name appeared on the screen. "Alex, where have you been? I've been trying to—" "Elaine!" His voice was tight with controlled emotion. "I need to postpone dinner. Something's happened." "What is it? Are you all right?" A bitter laugh. "Depends on your definition. I've just received some interesting information about certain board members' private discussions with GLC. It seems the plan to keep me as CEO was never genuine." Elaine glanced at Evelyn, whose expression confirmed this was the same information she had brought. "I know. Your grandmother is here with me now. She's been trying to warn you." A moment of stunned silence. "My grandmother? Evelyn is with you?" "Yes. She came to see me last week as well." Elaine hesitated. "That's what I've been trying to tell you. She was concerned about the potential sale, about your grandfather's legacy." Another silence, longer this time. "I see." His voice had cooled perceptibly. "So the two of you have been discussing my business decisions behind my back." "It wasn't like that, Alex." "Really? Because it sounds exactly like that." The hurt beneath his anger was palpable. "I trusted you with my uncertainties, my private struggles about this decision. Meanwhile, you were consulting with my grandmother, who has never approved of my leadership style, by the way, about how to manipulate my choice." "That's not fair," Elaine protested. "I didn't seek her out, and I didn't try to influence you based on what she said. Yet somehow, after her visit, you asked exactly the right questions to steer me toward keeping the company." The accusation hung between them, vibrating with betrayal. "I need to go. I have a board presentation to rewrite now that I know what I'm really walking into tomorrow." "Alex, please." "I'll call you after the vote." The line went dead. Elaine looked at Evelyn, whose composed facade had finally cracked to reveal genuine distress. "I've made things worse," the older woman said quietly. "I only wanted to protect him and Harold's legacy." "I know." Elaine set down her phone, a hollow feeling spreading in her chest. "But from his perspective, we've undermined his autonomy, treated him like someone who needed guidance rather than respect. He's always been fiercely independent, ever since he was a boy." Evelyn's eyes held the distant look of someone revisiting long-ago memories. "When Franklin, my son, his father, began dismantling everything Harold had built, Alexander took it as a personal failure that he couldn't stop it. He was only a teenager then. From that moment, he determined never to be powerless again, never to need anyone's help or guidance." The insight explained so much about Alex: his self-reliance, his occasional difficulty accepting support, his need to maintain control. It also made Elaine's heart ache for the young man who had shouldered such heavy burdens alone. "What do we do now?" she asked. Evelyn straightened her shoulders, resilience replacing regret. "We give him space to make his own decision without interference, and then, whatever he chooses, we support him completely." She met Elaine's gaze directly. "Both of us." The night passed with excruciating slowness. Elaine barely slept, replaying her conversation with Alex and imagining the board meeting that would determine not just the future of Reed Hospitality, but potentially their relationship as well. By dawn, she had given up on rest entirely, channeling her anxiety into what had always comforted her, the ritual of baking bread. She arrived at the bakery hours earlier than necessary, drawing solace from the familiar motions of feeding the starter, mixing dough, and creating something tangible and good from simple ingredients. The methodical work provided clarity that had eluded her during the sleepless night. Whatever happened with Alex and his company, she would face it directly. No more unsaid words or hesitation. Omar found her elbow deep in dough when he arrived. "You are here very early," he observed, his perceptive eyes noting her exhaustion. "The bread knows your troubles." "The bread knows everything," she replied with a weary smile, echoing his familiar refrain. He hung up his coat and washed his hands. "In my country, we say that dough worked by worried hands still makes good bread. It absorbs the baker's concerns and transforms them." "I hope that's true, because this batch has absorbed plenty." Omar didn't press for details, instead working alongside her in companionable silence. His quiet presence provided comfort as the bakery gradually filled with staff and the day's rhythms began in earnest. By mid-morning, the board meeting would be underway. Elaine checked her phone obsessively between tasks, though she knew Alex wouldn't contact her until the decision was made. Doubt gnawed at her. Had their argument affected his presentation? Would the board member's deception change his approach? Most troubling, had her unintended betrayal damaged something essential between them? Shortly before noon, her phone finally rang. The screen showed not Alex's name but Veronica's. "Ms. Morgan, Mr. Reed asked me to contact you." Veronica's professional tone revealed nothing. "He would appreciate if you could meet him at the lakefront garden in Lincoln Park at 2 o'clock. The formal request through his assistant sent a chill through Elaine. "Is he all right?" A slight hesitation. "I believe he would prefer to speak with you directly. Shall I tell him you'll be there?" "Yes, of course. Please tell him I'll come." The garden was one of their favorite walking spots, a place where their conversations had often turned most personal, away from business settings and professional personas. That he would choose this location for their meeting seemed significant, though whether positively or negatively, Elaine couldn't determine. She arrived early, too anxious to wait at the bakery, and found a bench overlooking a small pond. The afternoon sun cast dappled shadows through changing leaves, the first hints of autumn visible in touches of gold and russet among the green. She had brought no book or phone to distract her, instead watching ducks navigate the water with seeming purposelessness that nevertheless always brought them exactly where they needed to be. "You're early." Alex's voice behind her was quiet, without inflection. Elaine turned to find him standing a few paces away, his expression unreadable. Gone was the corporate uniform. Today he wore jeans and a simple sweater, looking more like the man who had shaped bread in her kitchen than the CEO who commanded boardrooms. "So are you," she answered, making room on the bench. He sat beside her, maintaining a careful distance. For a long moment, neither spoke, the silence filled with the ambient sounds of the garden, water lapping against stone, breezes through leaves, distant laughter from children on the nearby playground. "I owe you an apology," he said finally. "My reaction yesterday was unfair. I was hurt and lashed out instead of listening." The words eased some of the tightness in her chest. "I should have told you about Evelyn's first visit. I'm sorry I didn't." "Why didn't you?" The question held no accusation, only genuine curiosity. "At first, it felt like breaking a confidence. Then when you told me about the GLC offer, it became complicated. I didn't want you to think I was trying to influence you based on what she'd said." Elaine met his gaze directly. "I should have trusted that you would understand. That was my mistake." Alex nodded slowly. "We both have trust issues, it seems. Mine run deeper than I'd realized. Your grandmother told me a little about your father, about taking on the company so young. It explains a lot about your need for control, for independence. Does it? His smile held rueful self-awareness. I spent years fighting against becoming my father, only to adopt his worst trait, the inability to truly let anyone in. He shifted slightly, turning toward her. The board meeting was illuminating. The vote? She asked, fearing the answer. I withdrew the proposal before it went to vote. Surprise momentarily stole her words. You what? I began my presentation as planned, outlining the financial case for accepting GLC's offer, acknowledging the board members who had expressed support. His tone was conversational, but underlying determination shone through. Then I revealed what I'd learned about their private negotiations with GLC regarding my replacement. That must have been dramatic. You could say that. A brief smile touched his lips. 3 members immediately denied everything. 2 sat in stunned silence. 1, Janet Pembroke, who's been on the board since my grandfather's time, simply nodded as if confirming something she'd suspected. What happened next? I outlined an alternative vision for Reed Hospitality, returning to our founding principles of exceptional, personalized hospitality in distinctive properties, quality over quantity, connection over expansion. His eyes held hers. The principles that a certain baker helped me remember were important to me. Warmth spread through Elaine's chest. And the board's reaction? Mixed. Some were openly skeptical. Others seemed intrigued by the possibility of differentiating in an increasingly homogenized market. He leaned back slightly. But ultimately, it doesn't matter. I hold controlling interest in the company, a fact several members had conveniently forgotten. So Reed Hospitality remains independent. Yes, though with significant changes ahead, including to the board itself. His expression grew more serious. I've spent years trying to please everyone, Elaine. Investors demanding growth, analysts expecting quarterly improvements, a legacy to honor, my own ambitions. Yesterday I finally understood that I can't serve all those masters at once. I had to decide what truly matters to me. The parallel to her own journey wasn't lost on Elaine. And what does matter, Alex? Creating something meaningful, honoring craftsmanship and personal connection in an increasingly mass-produced world. His gaze held hers with quiet intensity. Building a life that includes both purpose and joy. The words resonated deeply with her own hard-won understanding of what constituted a successful life. That sounds like a worthy goal. It is. He reached for her hand, his touch tentative. There's more I need to tell you. After the meeting, I visited my grandmother. Elaine tensed slightly. How did that go? Better than you might expect. We had our first honest conversation in years. His thumb traced circles on her palm, the casual intimacy in striking contrast to the distance that had been between them moments ago. She told me everything, her concerns about the sale, her visits to you, her regrets about interfering. She also told me something I never knew. What's that? That my grandfather faced a similar decision at a crucial point in the company's growth. He had an offer from a larger hotel group that would have made him wealthy beyond imagination, but at the cost of his personal connection to the business he'd built. Alex's expression softened with the revelation. He chose independence despite significant financial incentives to sell. So you followed in his footsteps after all. It seems so. His smile held a touch of wonder. All these years I thought preserving his legacy meant financial success above all. I never understood that his legacy was about values, not valuation. They sat in companionable silence for a moment, the tension that had separated them gradually dissolving like sugar in warm water. Around them, the garden hummed with afternoon activity, an elderly couple feeding ducks, a young mother reading to her toddler, a group of teenagers sprawled on the grass with textbooks. I've been thinking a lot about bread, Alex said suddenly. Elaine couldn't help but laugh. "That's usually my line. Bear with me." His expression grew thoughtful. "Bread is paradoxical. It's universal. Every culture has some version of it, yet deeply personal. It's simple in its ingredients, but complex in execution. It requires both science and intuition." He looked at her with unexpected vulnerability. "And it doesn't work if you try to control it completely. You have to understand it, respect it, then let it develop according to its nature." "Like relationships," Elaine said softly, understanding where he was going. "Like relationships," he agreed. "I've spent my adult life maintaining control, keeping essential parts of myself separate from my connections with others. Even with you, despite how important you've become to me." His fingers tightened slightly around hers. "I don't want to live that way anymore." The directness of his statement took her breath away. "What are you saying, Alex?" "I'm saying that I love you, Elaine." The words were simple, unadorned with qualification or condition. "I love your strength, your integrity, your commitment to quality in everything you do. I love how you've rebuilt your life on your own terms. I love watching you teach others, seeing your joy when someone gets it right." His free hand came up to touch her face gently. "And I'm asking if there might be a chance that you could feel the same way about me." For a moment, Elaine couldn't speak past the emotion welling in her throat. She had known her feelings for Alex had deepened beyond friendship, beyond business partnership, but hearing him articulate his love so clearly forced her to confront the full depth of her own emotions and the fear that had kept her from acknowledging them. "Alex, she began, then faltered. "It's all right if you're not there yet," he said quickly, "or if you can't be. I understand how much Thomas still means to you." His understanding gave her the courage to continue. "Thomas will always be part of who I am, part of my heart, but I've learned that love isn't finite. It expands to include new possibilities without diminishing what came before." She met his gaze directly. "I do love you, Alex. I think I have for some time, but I've been afraid to admit it, even to myself." The joy that transformed his features was answer enough, but he still asked, "Afraid of what?" "Of starting over, of being vulnerable again, of building something that could be lost." She smiled through the tears that had begun to well in her eyes. "Loving someone is the ultimate leap of faith, like putting dough in the oven and trusting it will rise." She laughed, the sound bright with relief and happiness. "Exactly like that." When he leaned forward to kiss her, it felt like the most natural culmination of all they had shared and built together. His lips were gentle but certain against hers. The contact brief but filled with promise of more to come. As they walked hand in hand through the garden afterward, Elaine felt a sense of rightness settle over her. The path ahead wasn't perfectly clear. They would need to navigate the implications of their personal relationship for their business connections, consider what integration of their lives might look like, allow space for each to maintain individual identities while building something together. But for the first time since Thomas's death, she was genuinely excited about the future, ready to embrace new possibilities without fear. 3 months later, on a crisp December evening, Elaine surveyed the gathering in her expanded bakery space. The original location had been transformed for the night into a celebration venue. Tables arranged family-style, twinkling lights strung overhead, the aroma of fresh bread mingling with the scents of holiday dishes prepared by Skyline's kitchen staff. The occasion was twofold: the official launch of Breaking Bread, Elaine's cookbook that had evolved from a simple recipe collection into a meditation on the role of bread in creating community across cultures and generations, and the announcement of the Morgan's Bread Foundation, established to provide training and microloans to aspiring bakers from disadvantaged backgrounds. Walter Jenkins occupied a place of honor, beaming with grandfatherly pride as he chatted with Omar, whose family had recently arrived from Syria after years of navigation through refugee resettlement programs. Maya circulated with a tray of traditional Syrian flatbreads that Omar had taught the team to make, a symbol of the bakery's expanding cultural influences. Catherine Hartwell clinked glasses with Gregory Jenkins, celebrating the successful partnership between their businesses. Their model of ethical collaboration had already inspired similar arrangements between small producers and larger retailers in other cities, creating a ripple effect beyond Chicago. Across the room, Alex stood in conversation with his grandmother, their relationship gradually healing through honest communication and renewed respect. Evelyn had proven unexpectedly supportive of his vision for Reed Hospitality's future, offering insights from her husband's early years building the company that had provided valuable historical perspective. The changes Alex had implemented were already showing promising results. 3 underperforming properties had been sold, with resources redirected to enhancing the remaining hotels. A new training program emphasized personalized service and local cultural connection, distinguishing Reed properties from their more standardized competitors. Most significantly, employee satisfaction had increased dramatically as the company's values aligned more authentically with their daily practices. As if sensing her gaze, Alex looked up, offering a smile that still made Elaine's heart quicken. He excused himself from Evelyn and made his way to Elaine's side, slipping an arm around her waist with the easy familiarity they had developed over the past months. "Successful evening," he murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Beyond my expectations," she agreed, leaning into him slightly. "I never imagined this future for myself when we met." "Nor I." His expression turned reflective. "That morning when I first tasted your bread, I was just looking for a quality product for a new restaurant. I had no idea I was about to meet someone who would change my entire perspective on success and meaning. We've come a long way from that tiny apartment kitchen, and the bread has only gotten better." He nodded toward the central table, where loaves of all varieties were arranged like works of art, her original sourdough alongside new creations inspired by Omar's Middle Eastern techniques and Catherine's access to heritage grains. "Speaking of bread," Elaine said, "there's something I've been meaning to give you." She led him to her office, away from the celebration, and removed a small wooden box from her desk drawer. Inside, nestled in linen, was a mason jar containing a portion of her sourdough starter. "This is from my grandmother's original starter, the one that's been alive for over 30 years, she explained, suddenly feeling unexpectedly emotional. "I want you to have some, to keep at your place." Alex understood immediately the significance of the gesture. This wasn't merely ingredients, it was heritage, continuity, trust. In bread-making terms, it was the most intimate possible gift, a living legacy that required care to maintain and would, with proper attention, continue indefinitely. "Elaine," he took the jar with reverent hands, "I'm honored. I'll take good care of it." "I know you will." She smiled through sudden tears. "Consider it a symbol of faith in our future, whatever shape it takes." He set the starter carefully aside before drawing her into his arms. "I love you," he said simply, "and I'm extraordinarily grateful that your bread found its way to me." "I love you too," she answered, the words coming easily now. "And I think perhaps it wasn't just bread that brought us together. Thomas used to talk about invisible threads connecting people who are meant to find each other." Her smile held both past and future in perfect balance. Maybe he helped weave this particular thread. "I like to think he'd approve," Alex said. "He would. He always wanted me to be happy." She rested her hand over his heart, feeling its steady beat. "And I am, Alex. Truly." Outside the office, their gathered friends and colleagues continued celebrating the tangible fruits of their work. The cookbook, the foundation, the thriving businesses. But here in this quiet moment, Elaine and Alex honored something equally important, though less visible. The journey that had brought them together, the challenges overcome, the growth achieved, and the promise of all that lay ahead. Like the best bread, their connection had required the right ingredients, careful tending, patience through difficult processes, and faith that what emerged would be worth the wait. Standing together now, they knew with certainty that it was, and would continue to be, through whatever seasons might come. If you enjoyed this story, don't miss the next one. Just click on the screen.